Welcome to Mystic Realms Recap. Please like, share, and subscribe. Enjoy today's episode.
7th level origin core stage? Duanling Tian thought inwardly and was slightly surprised. Relying on his formidable spiritual force and the experience of Rebirth Martial Emperor, Duanling Tian was able to discern that this Hedong was a 7th level origin core stage martial artist. The nearby He Chun noticed Duanling Tian's gaze descending onto Hedong's figure and hurriedly said, "Duanling Tian, this is senior brother Hedong. He's one of the 7th level origin core stage outer court disciples of our Migres Peak. Our Migres Peak had 5 7th level origin core stage outer court disciples, and his strength is the strongest." Duanling Tian's brows knit. Hedong's strength would surely be extraordinary as he was able to stand out from amongst 5 7th level origin core stage outer court disciples. He's inferior to Shi Hao? Duanling Tian asked. Since Shi Hao is the publicly acknowledged number 1 in the outer court, then he presumably would surpass this Hedong. Senior brother Hedong's strength is slightly inferior to Shi Hao, but he always never admitted Shi Hao as the number 1 in the outer court. Supposedly, he's participating in the outer court martial competition this time because he wants to defeat Shi Hao and seize the first place in the outer court martial competition. He Chun slowly said, "Defeat Shi Hao and seize the first place in the outer court martial competition?" The corners of Duanling Tian's mouth curled into a trace of a faintly discernible smile. Did this Hedong really think that amongst the 7-star sword sect's outer court disciples, he was the strongest besides Shi Hao? In next to no time, more and more Migres Peak disciples gather on the Migres platform. Meanwhile, 10 outer court elders had arrived. Amongst the 10 outer court elders, Duanling Tian only recognized 2, Lu Qiu and Zhao Lin. Lu Qiu and Zhao Lin walked over shoulder to shoulder, so there ought to be some relationship between the two of them. Duanling Tian. In next to no time, Lu Qiu saw Duanling Tian from within the crowd and a wisp of a smile appeared on his face as he walked over in large strides. Elder Lu Qiu. Duanling Tian saw Lu Qiu being so enthusiastic and instantly lightly smiled as he greeted him in return. "Duanling Tian, I really misjudged you." Lu Qiu looked at Duanling Tian with an extremely complicated gaze. That time, it was he who received and led Duanling Tian to Migres Peak. Although he felt at that time that this young man around the age of 20 was different to the other new disciples, but he never imagined that Duanling Tian would actually be so abnormal. Duanling Tian hadn't even arrived at Migres Peak for a few days before he killed 2 4th-level origin core stage outer court disciples. 2 months later, he once again killed a 6th-level origin core stage outer court disciple, spreading his name throughout the entire 7-star sword sect's outer court. Of course, even in the inner court, there were many people who knew that a monstrous disciple, Duanling Tian, had appeared in the outer court. Work hard, get a good placing in the outer court martial competition this time. Lu Qiu lightly smiled to Duanling Tian before greeting the other outer court elders. If the rules of the outer court martial competition this time wasn't changed, he didn't doubt it in the slightest that Duanling Tian would be able to obtain the first place in the outer court martial competition. But this time, because Duanling Tian showed his ability, the peak masters of the 6 peaks of the outer court temporarily changed the rules of the outer court martial competition and didn't establish restrictions anymore. After changing the rules, the 7th level origin core stage disciples of the 6 great sword peaks in the outer court were able to participate in the outer court martial competition this time. This also caused the competition to become even fiercer. Even though Duanling Tian had once killed a 6th level origin core stage disciple 3 months ago, but the 6th level of the origin core stage and the 7th level of the origin core stage was a divide, and he didn't think that Duanling Tian would be able to defeat a 7th level origin core stage martial artist. Humph! Along with Lu Qiu walking off, Zhao Lin followed and his icy cold gaze focused onto Duanling Tian, as if waiting to swallow Duanling Tian up. Duanling Tian wasn't afraid in the slightest as he crossed gazes with Zhao Lin, and the corners of his mouth curled into a light smile, causing Zhao Lin's expression to become even more unsightly. "You're Duanling Tian?" Suddenly, a voice sounded out by Duanling Tian's ear, and he noticed that it was Hedong who'd originally closed his eyes to rest his mind in the distance, had actually come to his side unknowingly. Duanling Tian looked at He Dong and lightly nodded. I heard that you killed the Fecta Peak's 6th level origin, core stage outer court disciple, Xiao Ying, 3 months ago. Your natural talent isn't bad. He Dong nodded to Duanling Tian. His face was stiff and spoke in a reserved manner. Your natural talent isn't bad either. It ought to be not long before you're able to break through to the 8th level of the origin core stage, right? Duanling Tian's gaze was incomparably profound, and it descended onto He Dong, as if able to see through everything. Relying on his sharp spiritual force, Duanling Tian could feel the slight changes on He Dong's body. Although He Dong's expression didn't change, but his pupils couldn't help constrict as he noticed that before this outer court disciple that was a little over 20, he seemed as if he was completely without any secrets. The gaze of this outer court disciple seemed able to see through everything. Looks like I've still looked down on you. He Dong took a deep breath, and a wisp of a smile appeared on his stiff face. Then he nodded to Duanling Tian. He Dong. He Dong was introducing himself. Duanling Tian. Duanling Tian didn't have any bad impression towards He Dong, and now that He Dong was courteous, he naturally wouldn't be discourteous. Your reputation is well-deserved. He Dong smiled to Duanling Tian, and at the same time that he turned to leave, he added, Feel free to ask if you need my help on the matter with Shihao. Thank you. Duanling Tian lightly smiled. This He Dong was slightly interesting. The nearby He Chun was stunned. Duanling Tian, senior brother He Dong actually took the initiative to greet you earlier. Moreover, he even had the intention of helping you. Duanling Tian lightly smiled. Even if He Dong was willing to help him, he still wouldn't ask for it. He would deal with his own things. Moreover, according to He Chun, He Dong's strength seems to be inferior to Shihao. If He Dong suffered any injuries because of him, then he would really owe him a huge favor. After Lu Qiu and He Dong successively greeting Duanling Tian, for a time, Duanling Tian became the center of attention for the gazes of many. Along with the starting of the first round of the outer court martial competition, the gazes of these people left Duanling Tian. In the first round of the outer court martial competition, everyone would receive a number token, then take turns to battle. The number token Duanling Tian received was number 189, belonging to the 7th combat ring. A ring master would be born from every combat ring, a ring master that would advance in the end and obtain the qualification to participate in the second round of the outer court martial competition. It was unknown whether it was done intentionally by the group of Migres Peak Outer Court elders, but all the 5 7th level origin core stage disciples including He Dong were respectively divided to the 1st combat ring until the 5th combat ring. The outer court disciples that were allocated to these 5 combat rings all had faces full of bitter smiles. After the outer court martial competition began, the 5 7th level origin core stage outer court disciples stood there atop the 1st to the 5th combat ring, like undefeatable war gods. The outer court disciples that were allocated to these 5 combat rings all directly admitted defeat, as no one had the courage to ascend to the combat ring, because they knew that even if they ascended to the combat ring, they would just be looking for a bashing. They could only wait for the ring master of the other 5 combat rings to be born, then carry out challenges. Once a challenge was successful, they would be able to replace the ring master and become the new ring master. They'd then obtain the qualification to participate in the second round of the outer court martial competition tomorrow. So, they weren't discouraged. The 7th combat ring. The combat ring Duanling Tian belonged to, number 181 and number 182 had ascended the combat ring and were carrying out an elimination battle. Both of them were 5th level origin core stage outer court disciples. Meanwhile, Duanling Tian noticed that practically all the outer court disciples on the 1st to 5th combat ring, the 6th combat ring, the 8th combat ring, the 9th combat ring, and the 10th combat ring were all 5th level origin core stage disciples or 6th level origin core stage disciples. He couldn't see a single outer court disciple that was below the 5th level of the origin core stage. With a quick thought, he came to an understanding. It was practically impossible for outer court disciples below the 5th level of the origin core stage to obtain the final 10 places. So, even though there were many outer court disciples on the Migres platform, most came to watch the excitement. The outer court disciples that were truly participating in the first round of the outer court martial competition were only around 300 people. These 300 people were all outer court disciples at the 5th level of the origin core stage or above. Duanling Tian Gaze returned to the 7th combat ring. Meanwhile, the results of the battle between the two 5th level origin core stage outer court disciples had come out. One of them relied on a grade 7 spirit sword to firmly defeat the other outer court disciple that only possessed a grade 8 spirit sword. Such a pity. His strength wasn't inferior to his opponent, but he lost just because his spirit sword was inferior to his opponent. He Chun sighed and felt slight pity for the outer court disciple that lost. Duanling Tian lightly smiled. Spirit swords are a part of strength as well. In next to no time, a few elimination battles were carried out successively on the 7th combat ring. 10 combat rings, and there was a Migres Peak outer court elder standing beside every single one of them. The duty of these outer court elders was to prevent outer court disciples from being killed during these elimination battles. After all, swords and blades had no eyes. Number 189. The outer court elder that stood beside the 7th combat ring abruptly spoke. "It's my turn." Duanling Tian's brows knit, and his figure moved to ascend the 7th combat arena. Duanling Tian. The gaze of the outer court elder suddenly lit up when he saw Duanling Tian. Presently, the outer court disciple that stood atop the 7th combat ring was a 6th level origin core stage martial artist, and when he saw Duanling Tian, his originally composed expression was instantly slightly flurried. Duanling Tian had once killed a 6th level origin core stage outer court disciple 3 months ago. Duanling Tian attracted the gazes of many people as soon as he ascended the combat ring. The outer court disciples that were originally surrounding a side of the combat arena to watch on had now flowed over towards the 7th combat ring. "It's Duanling Tian. Duanling Tian has entered the ring. 3 months ago, I didn't see with my own 2 eyes the scene of Duanling Tian killing the 6th level origin core stage disciples, Xiao Ying, on the Fecta Peak's life and death arena. Today, I can finally see his elegant demeanor." Allegedly, Duanling Tian relied on a cultivation at the 5th level of the origin core stage to kill Xiao Ying 3 months ago. I've always been extremely curious about how he did it. You don't have to be curious now, as you're about to be able to see it. Streams of people flowed around the 7th combat ring, and everyone's gazes descended onto Duanling Tian. "Elder, how about we temporarily stop the battle here? We want to see Duanling Tian battle as well." After the 2 outer court disciples on the 6th combat ring discussed amongst themselves, they said to the outer court elder that stood at the side of the ring, "Okay, I just happen to want to see this Duanling Tian's skills." The outer court elder nodded and didn't have any objections. The outer court disciples and the outer court elders that were responsible for presiding over the battles on the 8th combat ring, the 9th combat ring, and the 10th combat ring all imitated the 6th combat ring. The 5 7th level origin core stage outer court disciples that stood on the 1st to the 5th combat rings, including He Dong, shot their gazes towards Duanling Tian. They were extremely interested in Duanling Tian as well. A young man that's a little over 20 had killed a 6th level origin core stage disciple on the Fecta Peak's life and death arena 3 months ago. They'd heard of this. Supposedly, the young man didn't utilize an inscription that day and completely relied on his own strength to kill his opponent. Simple, inconceivable. At least, they felt that at that age, it would be absolutely impossible for them to do this. Duanling Tian. Lu Qiu stood at the side of the 3rd combat ring, and his gaze descended onto the 7th combat ring, focusing on that figure that remained rooted to the ground. He saw the hope of the Migres Peak on this young man. He saw the hope of the 7-star sword sect. At the side of the 4th combat ring, Zhao Lin's face sank as he snorted lowly, and his eyes emitted an awe-inspiring cold light. As far as he was concerned, the only reason Duanling Tian had such achievements at such an age was because Duanling Tian cultivated that miraculous cultivation method, the Muscle Meridian Rebirth Scroll. If Duanling Tian didn't cultivate that cultivation method, he might not have such accomplishments. So he wanted to obtain that cultivation method no matter what, at any cost. using every means possible. In the seventh combat ring, Duanling Tian raised his hand and a 3-foot-long blade appeared out of thin air. This was a grade 7 spirit sword. Duanling Tian's opponent, the 6th-level Origin Core Stage Outer Court disciple, was a young man around the age of 26 or 27. He felt slightly nervous in his heart when faced against Duanling Tian, who had a carefree expression, and the hand which held his grade 7 spirit sword was slightly wet. That was cold sweat. Even though Duanling Tian was only a young man that was a little over 20, he brought an extremely huge pressure to him, to the point that he couldn't catch his breath. This was an existence that had once killed a 6th-level Origin Core Stage Outer Court disciple. Moreover, the strength of the 6th-level Origin Core Stage Outer Court disciple wasn't inferior to him. You won't kill me, right? Under the gazes of everyone present, the young man gulped down a mouthful of saliva and asked slightly difficulty. Of course not. There's no ill feelings between the two of us. Why would I kill you? Besides that, aren't there elders looking from the side? Duanling Tian shook his head and laughed bitterly, as he never imagined that he'd waited so long for his turn in the ring. But what he got were these words from his opponent. He was speechless in his heart. Do I look like that type of fierce person that kills people easily? Hee. The young man laughed embarrassedly, and under the shroud of the extremely impatient gazes from the surroundings, he finally moved. Whoosh! The young man's figure moved, his footsteps incomparably light, as he pulled out a string of afterimages and flashed to Duanling Tian's location in an instant. Above him, 80 ancient mammoth silhouettes condensed into form. Whoosh! A sword strike flashed out as if transforming into a bolt of thunder that appeared for a short instant, and it smashed down towards Duanling Tian with an imposing manner that can pierce through the sky. In the sky, another 21 ancient mammoth silhouettes appeared beside the 80 ancient mammoth silhouettes. This sword strike contained the strength of 101 ancient mammoths. Duanling Tian stood on the spot with a calm expression. When the young man arrived before, Duanling Tian's outer court disciple's attire was blown by the wind caused by his opponent's swiftly moving figure, causing it to flutter and whistle in the wind. Duanling Tian still isn't making a move? The spectating crowd wondered in their hearts when they saw the young man's sword transform into a bolt of thunder, smashing down towards Duanling Tian. Finally, Duanling Tian moved. Sword drawing arts. Everyone only felt something flash before their eyes, when a sword light that was swift to the limit instantly moved to intercept the sword strike of the young man that had transformed into a bolt of thunder. Above Duanling Tian, only 90 ancient mammoth silhouettes appeared. In other words, Duanling Tian was using the strength of a 5th-level Origin Core Stage martial artist and relying on his grade 7 spirit sword to execute the sword skill. At this instant, all the surrounding spectators held their breaths. The strength of Duanling Tian's sword strike had a difference of strength of 11 ancient mammoths compared to his opponent. Could he win? If it was before, no one would think Duanling Tian was able to win. But 3 months ago, Duanling Tian had once used this strength to kill a 6th-level Origin Core Stage martial artist. Finally, clang! The grade 7 spirit sword in Duanling Tian's hand, knocked onto the young man's grade 7 spirit sword, had transformed into a bolt of thunder. The two terrifying forces knocked each other, causing the air to shake. A smile appeared on the corners of Duanling Tian's mouth. The young man's sword descended, and he felt that Duanling Tian's strength seemed to be far weaker than his strength, and his face couldn't help but reveal an ecstatic expression. He was about to defeat Duanling Tian. He was excited in his heart, but in next to no time, the smile on his face froze, because he noticed that a terrifying vibration energy suddenly surged out from Duanling Tian's grade 7 spirit sword, and the frequency at which the energy vibrated became higher and higher. Let go! An explosive shout sounded in his ears, and the young man whose palm gripped his sword had split apart and was hesitating whether to let go of his sword or not, now didn't dare hesitate as he hurriedly let go. After Duanling Tian warned the young man, the grade 7 spirit sword in his hand trembled and flicked away his opponent's grade 7 spirit sword to crash onto the ground with a clang. If Duanling Tian's opponent didn't let go, then the bones in his entire body would have surely been shattered by the quake energy. Whoosh! The origin energy vibrating at a terrifying frequency on the grade 7 spirit sword in Duanling Tian's hand was withdrawn stealthily by him. Then the spirit sword transformed into a bolt of lightning that descended onto the young man's throat. The match was decided. The young man stood on the spot. The palm that he held his sword with had split apart, and fresh blood dripped onto the ground. But he instead seemed to have no reaction whatsoever. Cold sweat was ceaselessly coming out from his forehead. Even though he lost, but he didn't feel a sense of loss in the slightest, and instead felt rejoiced that he didn't die. The outer court elder at the side of the 7th combat ring was the first to recover from his shock, and he restrained the shock on his face as he announced, "Number 189, Duanling Tian, is victorious. He becomes the ring master of the 7th combat ring." Hua. A stone causes 1,000 ripples. Unbelievable. Simply too strange. Duanling Tian used a sword strike he swung out with the strength of 90 ancient mammoths to actually suppress an attack executed with the strength of 101 ancient mammoths. Truly beyond belief. 3 months ago, Duanling Tian used a weaker force to defeat a stronger enemy and killed Xiaoying on the Fekta Peak's life and death arena. Now, he once again used a weaker force to defeat a stronger enemy and defeated Armigres Peak's 6th level origin core stage martial artist. Too terrifying. At Duanling Tian's age, even the most outstanding 5 great young masters of our Azure Forest Imperial Kingdom's young generation seems to have been far less heaven-defying. Of course, looks like our 7-star sword sect has really gotten a peerless monster this time. All the outer court disciples had shocked expressions. Their gazes were extremely complicated, but even more, it was gazes of joy. Duanling Tian was an outer court disciple of their Migres Peak. In the future, even if Duanling Tian became an inner court disciple and headed to the main peak, Dubhe Peak, he would still have come from their Migres Peak and would be the pride of their Migres Peak. What a strange skill. Hidong stood on the first combat ring and looked at Duanling Tian, who had put away his sword and stood there in a proud and aloof manner, and a trace of shock appeared on his face. The other 4 7th-level origin core stage outer court disciples now looked at each other as well. Did you all see any inklings from his sword strike? One of the 7th-level origin core stage outer court disciples couldn't refrain from asking. Including Hidong, all the other 4 of them shook their heads. Actually, it wasn't just them. Even the 10 outer court elders of Migres Peak weren't able to see through what was special about Duanling Tian's sword strike. What a terrifying skill. Zhao Lin's burning gaze seemed as if able to see through Duanling Tian's body, and his mood surged, unable to calm down for a long time. Even I can't see through the skill this Duanling Tian executed, but I can be sure that it ought to be a skill from within the Muscle Meridian Rebirth Scrolls. The Muscle Meridian Rebirth Scroll, I must obtain it. At this moment, Zhao Lin seemed as if he'd become a devil. Duanling Tian felt Zhao Lin's gaze, and his body slightly inclined, his eyes just happening to cross Zhao Lin's. He saw the madness and greed in Zhao Lin's eyes. This Zhao Lin, he really is going on and on. Duanling Tian's face sank, as he naturally was able to guess Zhao Lin's thoughts. Zhao Lin probably had attributed all the miracles that happened on him towards that fictitious cultivation method that he made up, the Muscle Meridian Rebirth Scroll. I wonder what sort of expression Zhao Lin would have if he knew that there was no Muscle Meridian Rebirth Scroll in this world. Duanling Tian thought inwardly, and cold smile appeared on the corners of his mouth. SSSS, amongst the spectating outer court disciples, one of the outer court disciples was stunned for a very long time before unable to stop himself from letting out a breath of cold air in the end. He was precisely Tang Bai. He was the Tang Bai who was once entrusted by Zhao Lin to look for trouble with Duanling Tian, and he agreed to Duanling Tian's invitation to a battle on the life and death arena, but didn't dare come on the day. That time, Tang Bai had heard of the news of Duanling Tian killing the Fekta Peak's 6th-level origin core stage outer court disciple, Xiaoying, and it was because of this that he didn't dare come and carry out a battle on the life and death arena with Duanling Tian. Now, when he thought back to it, Tang Bai suddenly felt that he was so wise. Even though during these past 3 months, he'd suffered much contempt and he was extremely aggrieved in his heart, but now, the grievances in his heart vanished. Compared to his life and possessions, everything else wasn't worthy of being mentioned. The first round of the outer court martial competition continued. For a time, the 7th combat ring which Duanling Tian was at was similar to the 1st to the 5th combat rings, and had become a forbidden area that no one dared set foot in. There wasn't another outer court disciple that was allocated to the 7th combat ring that dared ascend to the 7th combat ring to battle Duanling Tian. They all admitted defeat and waited for the ring masters of the remaining 4 combat rings to be born. At that time, so long as they had the strength, they would still be able to obtain the chance to advance. Duanling Tian stood in the 7th combat ring and looked left and right in boredom, sometimes looking at the elimination battle of the 6th combat ring, sometimes looks at the 8th combat ring, the 9th combat ring, and the 10th combat ring. Time silently elapsed. In the time of merely a morning, the 10 Migres Peak disciples with the strongest strength and had obtained advancement had been born. Among the 10 Migres Peak disciples, 5 were at the 7th level of the Origin Core stage, and 4 were at the 6th level of the Origin Core stage. The remaining one person was Duanling Tian, who was at the 5th level of the Origin Core stage. The 10 of you head to Mizar Peak early tomorrow morning. The outer court martial competition this time will be held on the Mizar Peak's Mizar platform. When the time comes, it will be presided over personally by the Peak Master of Mizar Peak. After the first round of the outer court martial competition ended, the Migres Peak outer court elder, Lu Qiu, looked at Duanling Tian and the other 9 disciples and spoke slowly. Duanling Tian and the others nodded to express their understanding. In next to no time, with Lu Qiu in the lead, the 10 Migres Peak outer court elders left successively. Congratulations, senior brother He Dong. Congratulations, senior brother He Dong. Subsequently, the crowd of outer court disciples started to congratulate the outer court disciples that had advanced. Especially the 5 7th level Origin Core stage outer court disciples with Hedong in the lead were even surrounded by the crowd of outer court disciples. All the outer court disciples were incomparably zealous, as they all wanted to build good relations with Hedong and the other 4. After all, these 5 people would surely become inner court disciples in the future. Duanling Tian, congratulations. He Chun had arrived beside Duanling Tian as well, and congratulated Duanling Tian. Although he'd already known since long ago that with Duanling Tian's strength, Duanling Tian would surely be able to pass the first round of the outer court martial competition, but when this moment really came, he was still happy for Duanling Tian. Duanling Tian nodded with a smile to He Chun. Then the 2 of them walked shoulder to shoulder as they followed the crowd of Migres Peak disciples to leave the Migres platform. Duanling Tian bid his farewell to He Chun, then left. After leaving, Duanling Tian's brows knit, then merged into the flowing stream of people as he moved back and forth through the crowd, and only after half an hour did he conceal himself within a remote path within the mountain. Now, it's impossible to follow me no matter who it is. Duanling Tian's actions earlier weren't unnecessary, and he was precisely worried about being followed. Of course, it was mainly taking precautions against Zhao Lin. Today, Zhao Lin's behaviors caused Duanling Tian to feel pressure. He was convinced that so long as Zhao Lin didn't achieve his goal, then Zhao Lin would not let him off. So he had to take precautions. If he really allowed Zhao Lin to get even the slightest opportunity, then he would surely die, beyond redemption. Zhao Lin. Coldness flashed within Duanling Tian's eyes. Duanling Tian took a deep breath, and only then was he able to ease up his rage and surging mood, then headed towards the peak of Migres Peak, returning to the stalactite cave. And now, a figure flashed out on a mountain path on Migres Peak. Zhao Lin's figure appeared. Zhao Ling's face was as unsightly could be. That Duanling Tian is actually able to throw me off. Looks like it wasn't a coincidence or luck that he was able to throw me off in the past. In other words, he can discover my presence. At this moment, besides coldness, there was traces of greed mixed within Zhao Lin's eyes. Truly shocking. Duanling Tian, I never expected that you still had such ability. Or perhaps, the reason you're able to discover my presence is because of that miraculous cultivation technique, the Muscle Meridian Rebirth Scroll. Now, Zhao Lin attributed all the things that were difficult to imagine or the miracles that happened around Duanling Tian to the Muscle Meridian Rebirth Scroll. His yearning in his heart towards the Muscle Meridian Rebirth Scroll became stronger and stronger as well. Duanling Tian, I'll surely obtain your Muscle Meridian Rebirth Scroll. Zhao Lin thought in his heart, then seeming to have thought of something, he left Migres Peak. After stepping on the chain bridge and arriving at Dubhe Peak, he continued to head towards the distance and in the end arrived at Alioth Peak. Within a spacious gorge in Alioth Peak, Elder Zhao Lin, the young man with triangular eyes and a distorted and hideous appearance, noticed the middle-aged man that walked in, then slightly frowned. He recognized the person before him, the Migres Peak's outer court elder, Zhao Lin. Shi Hao. Zhao Lin saw Shi Hao and lightly nodded. Even though Shi Hao was the #1 disciple in the 7-star sword sect's outer court, but he was only a 7th-level origin core stage martial artist, and in the eyes of the 7-star sword sect elders, he was no different than an ant. Elder Zhao Lin, may I know why you've come look for me? Shi Hao went straight to the point and asked, as he didn't think that this Migres Peak outer court disciple came just to visit him. Even though he and this Migres Peak elder recognized each other, but they never spoke even a word to each other. Shi Hao, I won't beat around the bush. I came here to find you because of Duanling Tian. Zhao Lin went straight to the point, and his eyes flickered with a dense, fierce light. Huh. Shi Hao frowned. His originally distorted and hideous features now were entangled together, and his triangular eyes flickered with an icy cold sheen. He noticed the fierce light in Zhao Lin's eyes. He thought that the fierceness in Zhao Lin's eyes was aimed towards him, and his face instantly sank. Elder Zhao Lin, I'm sorry, if it's about the matter with Duanling Tian, then there's nothing to discuss between the two of us. Zhao Lin was an outer court elder of Migres Peak. Duanling Tian was a Migres Peak disciple. As far as he was concerned, Zhao Lin surely came here to ask him to dispel any thoughts of dealing with Duanling Tian. Zhao Lin's face sank when he heard Shi Hao, and his eyes revealed dense coldness. Whoosh! Zhao Lin raised his hand. His sleeve abruptly shot out to sweep towards Shi Hao. Instantly, hundreds of ancient mammoth silhouettes condensed into form above Zhao Lin. Bang! A loud sound echoed out. Shi Hao was swept flying by Zhao Lin, like an arrow that left the bowstring. Bang! Shi Hao crashed onto the floor in a sorry state, his mouth ceaselessly spitting blood out, but his triangular eyes stared fixedly at Zhao Lin, and within them was an awe-inspiring coldness mixed within. Zhao Lin, you dare lay a hand on me? Lay a hand on you? Zhao Lin sneered. His body flashed, and in the blink of an eye, he'd arrived before Shi Hao, then origin energy surged and condensed in his hand. Do you believe that if my hand descends, you'll surely die? He'd already held back when he swung out his sleeve earlier. If he were to attack at full force, then Shi Hao would have died earlier without a doubt. Even if he killed Shi Hao within this gorge, no one would know that it was he who did it. Thus, he completely didn't have to worry about the 7-star sword sect blaming him. Shi Hao's face sank, and the coldness in his triangular eyes grew colder. So what? I won't let that Duanling Tian off even if I die. He crippled my sister's Dantian. I must kill him. No one is able to stop me. Shi Hao's words caused Zhao Lin's face to freeze. You thought I want you to let Duanling Tian off? Could it be that you aren't? Shi Hao sneered, and his triangular eyes were icy cold as before. Hmph! Zhao Lin snorted coldly, then scolded. Idiot! I wish for nothing more than to kill that Duanling Tian. You actually thought I want to ask you to let him off? What a joke. The enraged expression on Shi Hao's face completely froze, then looked at Zhao Lin in doubt. Elder Zhao Lin, are you telling the truth? Do you think I have any need to deceive you? Zhao Lin raised his hand, and a grade 7 gold injury pill flew out to descend onto Shi Hao's hand. Consume it. Shi Hao took a deep breath and consumed the medicinal pill, and he stood up after his injuries recovered, then had a slight, apologetic expression. Elder Zhao Lin, I'm sorry, It's sure how who misunderstood you. But I wonder why Elder Zhao Lin came here today. I naturally came here to give you a chance to kill Duanling Tian. Zhao Lin's gaze went cold as he slowly said. Zhao Lin continued when he saw the bewildered expression on Shihao's face. Shihao, you wouldn't be thinking that if you're able to encounter Duanling Tian tomorrow, you'll be able to kill him, right? The outer court martial competition had always strictly prohibited killing between fellow disciples. If you really dare to directly kill Duanling Tian, the trouble you'll have to face probably wouldn't be little. Humph. Shihao's face sank, and trace of coldness appeared in his eyes. So what? For the sake of my sister, Shi Yin, I will surely burn the bones and scatter the ashes of Duanling Tian, no matter the cost. The rules of the Seven-Star Sword sect can't stop me. Then what if you're able to kill Duanling Tian and don't have to violate the rules of the Seven-Star Sword sect? Zhao Lin said indifferently. Elder Zhao Lin, what do you mean by this? Shihao frowned and had a puzzled expression. If I have a way to make the outer court martial competition tomorrow become a life and death competition, what do you think of it? Do you have the feeling of being a stranded fish put back into water? The corners of Zhao Lin's mouth secretly contained a plotting smile. For real. Shihao's eyes lit up. If this was really possible, then even if he killed Duanling Tian, it wouldn't violate the rules of the Seven-Star Sword sect. After all, since it's understood to be a life and death competition since the beginning, then even if someone died, there would be no ground for blame. Is there any need for me to deceive you? Zhao Lin had a confident expression. Shihao took a deep breath, then looked at Zhao Lin with a burning gaze. Elder Zhao Lin, you specially came to look for me and spoke to me of this. You ought to have not only come here to tell me of this good news, right? Zhao Lin nodded. Of course. My request is simple. After you kill that Duanling Tian, I want his spatial ring. Just this? Shihao was stunned. This request was simple indeed. Although he realized that there ought to be something Zhao Lin required within Duanling Tian's spatial ring, but he didn't care. He only wanted to take revenge for his sister. Just this. Zhao Lin nodded. How about it? Elder Zhao Lin, I agree. So long as you can make the outer court martial competition tomorrow become a life and death competition. Shihao agreed. As far as he was concerned, this matter was a great matter that delivered itself to him. Good. Zhao Lin started laughing, then left in satisfaction. As far as he was concerned, so long as he obtained Duanling Tian's spatial ring, he would surely be able to obtain the Muscle Meridian Rebirth Scroll. From the accomplishments that Duanling Tian had obtained until now, he could perceive how the Muscle Meridian Rebirth Scroll was extraordinary, and he was practically sure that Duanling Tian would surely bring along such a cultivation method on his person. After all, the more profound a cultivation method was, the more complicated it was, and was difficult to memorize. This was why it would normally be carried on one's person. At the side of the cliff on the peak of Migres Peak, Duanling Tian was lying on the tilted tree that was concealed within the clouds and mist, lying on the strong tree branch of the tilted tree. Two little fellows that make me worried. Duanling Tian drank monkey wine as he gazed at the direction of the primeval forest, and he thought of the two little pythons again. I wonder if Ku Er has returned. Duanling Tian's face revealed a smile when he thought of Ku Er. That delicate and touching young girl that he met on the street of Fresh Breeze City all those years ago had not only become able to act alone and take responsibility, and at the same time that he felt gratified, he also felt love. That was his woman. His first woman. Early in the morning the next day, Duanling Tian bathed in mountain dew before leaving the Migres Peak's mountain peak. It was the first time Duanling Tian had gone to Mizar Peak, so he didn't know its location. However, after he'd arrived at the main peak, Dubhe Peak, he could see the flowing stream of people moving towards a direction. He understood in his heart that these people were surely heading towards the Mizar Peak's platform. So he followed the stream of people and walked over. On the way, he could hear various discussions. I never expected that the outer court martial competition this time would actually have its rules changed and stop the restriction that only outer court disciples who had entered the Seven-Star Sword sect for less than 3 years are able to participate. Yeah, I originally thought that I'm at the 5th level of the origin core stage after all, and ought to be able to pass the first round of the outer court martial competition. But now that the rules have been changed, the disciples that advanced from the first round of the outer court martial competition are either at the 6th level of the origin core stage or the 7th level of the origin core stage. Now that the rules have changed, the first place of the outer court martial competition this time would surely be the Alioth Peak senior brother Sure, how without a doubt. That might not be the case. Don't you forget the Migres Peak senior brother Hedong, the Alcade Peak senior sisters Waching, and the Merak Peak senior brother Hu Shuefeng. Their strengths aren't inferior to senior brother Sure Hao. I heard that a while ago, the Merak Peak senior brother Hu Shuefeng had a grade 7 spirit sword that amplifies strength by 29% bestowed upon him by his master, the Peak Master of Merak Peak. What? A grade 7 spirit sword that provides an amplification of 29%? Are you sure? Grade 7 spirit sword that provides an amplification of 29%? Duanling Tian walked on the chain bridge that lead to Mizar Peak, and was slightly moved when he heard the discussion of the 7-star sword sect outer court disciples that passed by. The higher the grade of a spirit weapon, the more difficult it was to refine. That time at the Crimson Sky Kingdom's Swallow Mountain County's County City, he had a life wager by weapons refinement with the second elder of the Zhu clan. The Zhu clan's second elder being able to refine a grade 8 spirit weapon capable of providing an amplification of 19% was already extremely hard to come by. It could be considered as top quality amongst the grade 8 spirit weapons, whereas a grade 7 spirit weapon being able to provide an amplification of 29% was even harder to come by than the former. Even if it's me, when my cultivation steps into the 7th level of the origin core stage and I become a grade 7 weapons craftsman, at most I would be able to refine a grade 7 spirit weapon with an amplification of 31%. And if I were to go all out, I could refine a grade 8 spirit weapon with an amplification of 22% now. So Duanling Tian deeply knew how hard it was to come by a grade 7 spirit sword that provided an amplification of 29%. I never expected that there's a weapons craftsman capable of refining a grade 7 spirit sword, which provides an amplification of 29% in this tiny Azure Forest Imperial Kingdom. Duanling Tian couldn't help but be slightly surprised in his heart. In next to no time, the discussions of those people once again entered Duanling Tian's ears. Allegedly, the Peak Master of Merak Peak specially headed to Darkstone Empire and asked a great weapons craftsman there to refine it for senior brother Hu Shuefeng. Even if it's the Darkstone Empire, a great weapons craftsman capable of refining a grade 7 spirit sword that provides an amplification of 29% is surely not a nobody. I'd long since heard that the Peak Master of Merak Peak was extremely fond of senior brother Hu Shuefeng, but I never imagined that he was fond of senior brother Hu Shuefeng to such an extent. With that grade 7 spirit sword to rely on, the strength of senior brother Hu Shuefeng has surely increased a lot. Duanling Tian came to a sudden understanding. So it turned out that the grade 7 spirit sword that provided an amplification of 29% was refined by a weapons craftsman of the Darkstone Empire. Darkstone Empire. If the Crimson Sky Kingdom was the subordinate kingdom of the Azure Forest Imperial Kingdom, then the Azure Forest Imperial Kingdom is the subordinate kingdom of the Darkstone Empire. This was something that Duanling Tian had knowledge of. But even then, it still caused Duanling Tian to be surprised. According to the memories of Rebirth Martial Emperor, even in the foreign lands, weapons craftsmen capable of refining grade 7 spirit swords that provide an amplification of 29% were rarely seen. Duanling Tian could be sure that weapons craftsman surely had his own unique originality. Before long, Duanling Tian had followed the stream of people to arrive at Mizar Peak and arrived at his destination, the Mizar platform, in the end. The Mizar platform of Mizar Peak was similar to the Migres Peak's Migres platform and was an extremely vast platform that had 10 spacious combat rings atop it. At the Migres platform yesterday, there were only Migres Peak disciples. Thus, although there were many people, it didn't seem crowded. But today, on this Mizar platform, streams of people surged, causing it to be difficult for one to move a single step. Duanling Tian. Suddenly, A voice sounded into his ears, causing Duanling Tian to be unable to help from turning his head to look behind him. It was an extremely unfamiliar seven-star sword sect outer court disciple that had greeted him. "You are?" Duanling Tian didn't recognize this outer court disciple. "Duanling Tian, I'm a disciple of Migres Peak. On the Migres platform yesterday, that sword strike of yours that was as if being assisted by the gods was too formidable." This Migres Peak disciple had an excited expression when he saw Duanling Tian actually replying to him. Duanling Tian was stunned, then returned a smile. "Duanling Tian? He's Duanling Tian? The Migres Peak's little freak, Duanling Tian?" Duanling Tian noticed that along with the Migres Peak disciples greeting him, for a moment, the surrounding crowd of seven-star sword sect outer court disciples kept a good distance from him as they surrounded him and sized him up. "So young. He's at most a little over 20. It's he who killed the Fecta Peak's 6th level origin core stage outer court disciple, Xiao Ying?" All the seven-star sword sect outer court disciples' words were filled with interest towards Duanling Tian. Duanling Tian frowned, as he didn't like this sort of feeling. "Scoundrel!" Suddenly, a voice that was moving like the voice of an oriole sounded in Duanling Tian's ears. He'd only heard the voice and not seen the owner, but Duanling Tian already knew who it was. Duanling Tian's slightly stiff face emitted a trace of a light smile as he walked out of the crowd in large strides. Perhaps it was because the surrounding people knew of Duanling Tian's identity and were afraid, so the crowd of people automatically opened up a path wherever Duanling Tian passed. Duanling Tian arrived outside the Mizar platform and looked at Li Fei, who stood there with a happy expression, and his eyes were filled with tender love. "Little Fei." "Duanling Tian, I thought junior sister was seeing things when she said she saw you earlier." A delicate and beautiful woman by Li Fei's side smiled mischievously. "Senior sister, what are you talking about?" Li Fei's face instantly blushed from embarrassment. "Senior sister." Duanling Tian looked at the woman and lightly smiled as he greeted, and in his heart he was secretly shocked. Earlier, he only knew that little Fei's senior sister was called Zhuoqing. But on the way here earlier, he instead heard many outer court disciples mentioning Zhuoqing, and their discussions places Zhuoqing at a position in the seven-star sword sect's outer court to be merely inferior to the number 1 disciple in the seven-star sword sect's outer court, Shihao. Placed side by side with the Migres Peak's He Dong and the Merak Peak's He Shuefeng. Only at that time did he realize how extraordinary this senior sister Zhuoqing was. Zhuoqing looked at Duanling Tian and returned a smile. The young man before her was the man of her junior sister, and under the extension of her love for Li Fei, she didn't take Duanling Tian to be an outsider. "It's senior sister Zhuoqing." Before long, many seven-star sword sect outer court disciples on the Mizar platform recognized Zhuoqing and exclaimed out in surprise. "The junior sister by senior sister Zhuoqing's side is so beautiful. Too beautiful. Breathtakingly beautiful. One smile to overthrow a city, two to overthrow a kingdom. It's nothing more than that." The gazes of all the seven-star sword sect outer court disciples descended onto Li Fei, who was beside Zhuoqing. To them, Li Fei was really too beautiful. Even though there were many female disciples within the seven-star sword sect, but there was practically no female disciples that had a peerless appearance like Li Fei. In terms of cultivation, females were born weaker than males, so outstanding female disciples in the martial Tao was extremely rare. And a female disciple that was outstanding in both the martial Tao and appearance was 1 in a million. Thus, when the crowd of seven-star sword sect outer court disciples saw such a beauty in the seven-star sword sect, they slightly forgot themselves. Even though everyone loved beauty, but now that so many burning gazes descended onto Li Fei, it still caused Duanling Tian to be displeased. Duanling Tian extended his hand to grab onto Li Fei's jade-like hand domineeringly and pulled Li Fei to his side, as if he was announcing his ownership of Li Fei. "Scoundrel!" Li Fei's beautiful face blushed from being pulled over by Duanling Tian like this in public, and her pink cheeks seemed as if they would break with a flick of the finger, causing the crowd of seven-star sword sect outer court disciples on the Mizar platform to be dumbstruck. But the strand of indistinct happiness within Li Fei's watery, beautiful eyes was extremely obvious. Instantly, the seven-star sword sect outer court disciples that recovered from their shock shot killer gazes at Duan Ling Tian, wishing for nothing more than to kill Duan Ling Tian and take his place. A drop-dead gorgeous junior sister had finally appeared in our seven-star sword sect, but I never imagined that someone had already outstripped everyone else. This Duan Ling Tian is simple a winner in life. Not only is his natural talent in the martial Dao shocking, but he's actually able to obtain the favor of this junior sister. Anyway, I'm afraid only a man like Duan Ling Tian deserves this junior sister. You're right. The undisguised discussion of the seven-star sword sect male outer court disciples caused Li Fei's bright red blush to grow deeper. Little Fei, has Ku-er returned? Duan Ling Tian didn't pay attention to the jealous and envious gazes from the surroundings and looked at Li Fei as he asked with slight anticipation. Li Fei shook her head. I asked Master yesterday. Master said the Peak Master and Ku-er haven't returned. Looks like little sister Ku-er won't be able to make it for the outer court martial competition this time. Duan Ling Tian lightly nodded. Before long, Duan Ling Tian, who only had Li Fei in his eyes, seemed to have noticed something, and his expression froze. Little Fei, you broke through? Li Fei's angelic face had a light smile. I broke through a few days ago. Duan Ling Tian, you have to work hard. Junior sister has caught up to you now. Zuoqing looked at Duan Ling Tian at the right moment and joked. A few days ago when she found out Li Fei had broken through, Zuoqing was extremely shocked. After all, her junior sister had just broken through to the 4th level of the Origin Core stage 3 months ago. And it's only been 3 months, but her junior sister actually broke through again, breaking through to the 5th level of the Origin Core stage. Duan Ling Tian laughed when he heard Zuoqing, seeming to not mind in the least that Li Fei's cultivation had caught up to him. Senior sister, even though I've broken through, but I still didn't have the ability to pass the first round of the outer court martial competition. Li Fei faintly sighed, seemed to feel a slight sense of loss and regret. Zuoqing shook her head and smiled. Junior sister, the outer court martial competition this time is comparatively special. No one imagined that the peak masters of the 6 peaks would temporarily change the rules. If the rules weren't changed, you could have surely advanced with your current cultivation and participated in the 2nd round of the outer court martial competition. As she spoke up to hear, Zuoqing deeply glanced at Duan Ling Tian, as if she was saying to him, all this is your fault. If it wasn't for you, the outer court martial competition's rules wouldn't be changed temporarily. Duan Ling Tian smiled embarrassedly. This was something that even he hadn't expected. Scoundrel, you and senior sister have to give it your all, and it's best if you take the 1st place. Li Fei quickly recovered from her sense of loss and cheered Duan Ling Tian and Zuoqing on. Her beautiful red lips were slightly rosy, causing others to be unable to stop themselves from having the urge to give her some kisses. Duan Ling Tian lightly smiled as he nodded. He'd come participate in the outer court martial competition this time, precisely for the 1st place. Junior sister. Zuoqing shook her head and smiled. It isn't so easy. All outer court disciples are able to participate in the outer court martial competition this time. Amongst them, I have no confidence whatsoever against the Alioth Peak Sure Hao. Sure Hao. Li Fei's beautiful eyebrows slightly frowned. This name, why does it feel slightly familiar? Duan Ling Tian shrugged when he saw Zuoqing looking over with a strange expression and said to Li Fei, this Sure Hao is the brother who's the number 1 disciple in the outer court that Shi Yan spoke of. Shi Yan's brother? Li Fei's peerlessly beautiful face couldn't help but sink when she recalled Shi Yan. She didn't have a good impression in the slightest towards that woman who had distorted features and a distorted heart. I heard Sure Hao went looking for you at Migres Peak? Zuoqing looked at Duan Ling Tian and asked, senior sister, you're really well informed. Duan Ling Tian was slightly surprised that Zuoqing knew about this. After all, even he only found out about this a while ago. Moreover, besides the disciples of Migres Peak, there didn't seem to be many people that knew of it. After all, he was a disciple of Migres Peak at any rate. In the eyes of the Migres Peak disciples, He was afraid of how so he didn't dare reveal himself. As the saying goes, the shame of the family should not be made public. On this matter, the Migres Peak disciples had reached a tacit understanding and didn't recklessly publicize the matter. Scoundrel, Hao has come looking for you? Are you all right? Li Fei had an anxious expression when she heard that Hao had come look for Duanling Tian, and her beautiful eyes squinted as she sized up Duanling Tian, seemed to want to carefully inspect if Duanling Tian was injured. Duanling Tian shook his head with a smile when faced with Li Fei getting anxious from concern. Little Fei, you're still worried that I would suffer a loss in the hands of that Hao? Li Fei recovered from her anxious feeling when faced with Duanling Tian's confidence. Only now did she recall that her man had many sources of reliance in his possession. Not to mention those two nascent soul stage little pythons. Even the pile of inscription in the possession of her man was sufficient to allow him to be invincible when fighting Hao. Li Fei nodded and smiled. The worry on her face had vanished. Zuoqing noticed the changes in Li Fei's expression, and it caused her to be astonished. This junior sister of hers is actually so confident of her little lover? She wouldn't be thinking that her little lover is able to deal with Hao, right? Even though Zuoqing knew that Duanling Tian's strength was extraordinary and had even killed a 6th-level Origin Core Stage Outer Court disciple on the Fecta Peaks Life and Death Arena 3 months ago. But even then, it didn't mean that Duanling Tian was able to deal with a 7th-level Origin Core Stage Outer Court disciple. As a 7th-level Origin Core Stage Outer Court disciple, Zuoqing deeply knew that a 7th-level Origin Core Stage martial artist was something a 6th-level Origin Core Stage martial artist was far from being able to compare to. There was a divide between the two, an immeasurably vast difference. It's the Migres Peak's senior brother He Dong. In next to no time, the gazes moved off from Duanling Tian's group of 3 and descended on the young man that was slowly walking down Mizar Peak. This young man was precisely He Dong. He Dong saw Duanling Tian and nodded with a smile to him. Duanling Tian returned a smile. He Dong is rather courteous to you. Zuoqing was slightly surprised when she saw this. But with a quick thought, she quickly came to an understanding. Although Duanling Tian might be inferior to 7th-level Origin Core Stage Outer Court disciples like her and He Dong now, but how old were they, and how old was Duanling Tian? When they were at Duanling Tian's age, they seemed to have not even stepped into the 4th level of the Origin Core Stage. She could imagine that with Duanling Tian's natural talent, when he was their age in the future, his strength would absolutely exceed their imaginations. Duanling Tian's natural talent was sufficient to obtain their respect. Before long, the 7-level Origin Core Stage martial artists of the 7-star Sword Sect's Outer Court's 6 Great Sword Peaks had arrived one by one. The arrival of these people also caused the Mizar platform to be bustling with noise and excitement. Senior brother Hu Shuefeng has arrived. It was unknown who shouted out. Instantly, on the Mizar platform, gazes gathered onto the proud and aloof figure that was walking over from afar. This was a handsome young man with sword-shaped eyebrows and starry eyes at the age of around 25. At the moment he appeared, he seemed to have seized the limelight of the other 7th-level Origin Core Stage martial artists and become the absolute center of attention. Senior brother Shuefeng. Some of the Alcade Peak female disciples even lost their composure as they screamed out. He's Hu Shuefeng? Duanling Tian gaze descended onto Hu Shuefeng. Although he didn't know Hu Shuefeng before today, and even had never heard of him, but on his way to Mizar Peak today, he'd heard many disciples discussing this Hu Shuefeng. He also knew that Hu Shuefeng was the personal disciple of the 7-star Sword Sect's Merak Peak's master. For the sake of this personal disciple, the Peak Master of Merak Peak had even asked a weapons craftsman of Darkstone Empire to refine a Grade 7 spirit sword that amplified strength by 29%. The love of the Merak Peak's master towards this personal disciple could be obviously seen. Senior sister, what's wrong? Duanling Tian turned around when he heard Li Fei's voice that was moving like the sound of an oriole, and only now did he notice that when Zuoqing's gaze had coldness mixed within when she looked at Hu Shuefeng. Duanling Tian was surprised. Although he couldn't be considered as familiar with Zuoqing, but he was able to discern from Zhuo Qing's behavior that she was a kind and pure woman. But now, Zhuo Qing seemed to be full of hostility towards Hu Shuefeng. This caused Duanling Tian to be bewildered in his heart. Could it be that there was some conflict between Zhuo Qing and Hu Shuefeng? This Hu Shuefeng is a complete pervert. Zhuo Qing's delicate and beautiful face was covered in a layer of ice and was extremely cold. Duanling Tian and Li Fei couldn't help but be stunned when they heard this and unconsciously looked at each other. They both saw a trace of a strange expression within each other's eyes. "Senior sister, you and him?" Duanling Tian looked at Zhuo Qing and was slightly hesitant. Zhuo Qing perceived the strangeness in Duanling Tian's eyes, then glanced at Li Fei, and when she noticed Li Fei's expression was similar to Duanling Tian, she couldn't help but shake her head. "You two have misunderstood. There's nothing between me and him. The reason I said he's a pervert is because he's come to our Alcade Peak to seduce many female disciples. In the end, those female disciples were heartlessly abandoned by him, and some even committed suicide because of him." As she finished speaking, Zhuo Qing had a face full of rage. Such a person is still able to be warmly received by the Alcade Peak's female disciples? Duanling Tian saw a group of Alcade Peak female disciples enthusiastically greeting Hu Shuefeng and had a bewildered expression. Only from his outward appearance, Hu Shuefeng was handsome and extraordinary, with a graceful bearing. He was completely unable to perceive that he was such a person. This caused Duanling Tian to be unable to help himself from recalling the saying, "One may know a man's outward appearance, but not his heart." That's because he concealed it extremely deeply. Moreover, every time something happened to one of the female disciples related to him, he would cleanly wash his hands from the matter at the first possible moment, and his methods are extremely brilliant. Zhuo Qing grunted coldly as she slowly responded. Duanling Tian could sense that at this moment, the temperature of the air surrounding Zhuo Qing's body seemed to have went down slightly. There's actually such a shameless person. Li Fei had a furious expression when she heard Zhuo Qing, and angrily stared at Hu Shuefeng, who walked swiftly from afar towards Mizar platform. Duanling Tian's gaze descended onto Hu Shuefeng as well. Suddenly, Duanling Tian frowned because he noticed that Hu Shuefeng's gaze had actually descended onto Li Fei. Deep within that pair of clear eyes, a strand of a flowing light of lust flashed briefly. Although Hu Shuefeng concealed it brilliantly, but Duanling Tian still saw it clearly. Instantly, he was practically able to be sure that this Hu Shuefeng was exactly as Zhuo Qing had said, a hypocrite that only posed as someone gentlemanly. The corners of Duanling Tian's mouth curled into a cold smile when he saw Hu Shuefeng's eyes shine after seeing Li Fei, then slowly walking over to them. Zhuo Qing's face went cold. Li Fei's beautiful eyebrows slightly frowned. "Zhuo Qing, it's been a long time." After Hu Shuefeng walked over, he warmly greeted Zhuo Qing. "Hu Shuefeng, I'm not familiar with you. Scram back to from where you came." Zhuo Qing's face was enveloped in a layer of ice that was extremely cold when facing Hu Shuefeng, as if able to freeze the air. "Zhuo Qing, is there any misunderstanding between us?" A warm and brilliant smile hung on Hu Shuefeng's face from start to finish. He looked handsome and cheerful, absolutely a perfect and elegant young master. If it wasn't for Zhuo Qing's warning beforehand, Duanling Tian and Li Fei might have been deceived by Hu Shuefeng's refined and courteous appearance. Hu Shuefeng was too good at acting, without even the slightest flaw. "Hu Shuefeng, we are neither familiar, nor have any misunderstanding between us. You're just unpleasant to my eye, and I don't want to see you. Scram." As she finished speaking, a wisp of rage appeared on Zhuo Qing's face. Hu Shuefeng instead seemed as if he completely didn't hear as Zhuo Qing said and had a warm smile on his face as he looked at the nearby Li Fei, then asked with a light smile, "May I know your name, junior sister?" Duanling Tian noticed that when Hu Shuefeng noticed his hand holding Li Fei's hand, Hu Shuefeng swept Duanling Tian with a gaze out of the corners of his eyes, and a slight sheen of gloominess and threat was obviously mixed within, waiting for a chance to swallow Duanling Tian. The corners of Duanling Tian's mouth curled into a cold smile. This Hu Shuefeng thought that he could intimidate Duanling Tian like this? Li Fei instead ignored Hu Shuefeng's polite greetings, as if she never heard it at all. The smile on Hu Shuefeng's face was slightly stiff, but he still maintained it as his gaze moved on to Duan Tian, and a trace of an awe-inspiring coldness was mixed deep within his gaze. Junior brother, what's your name? Little Fei, let's go over. Duan Tian held Li Fei's hand and walked swiftly towards Mizar platform and didn't even look Hu Shuefeng in the eye the whole time. Okay. The smile on Hu Shuefeng's face completely froze when he saw Li Fei obediently nodding, then supported herself on Duan Tian's sturdy shoulder like a little bird resting upon a man, and walked into the Mizar platform. The ice on Zuoqing's face seemed to instantly melt when she saw Hu Shuefeng's face slightly sink, then smiled and said, Hu Shuefeng, this junior brother is my junior sister's man. He is called Duan Tian. After she finished, Zuoqing followed up to Duan Tian and Li Fei. Duan Tian? These three words were like a thunderclap that resounded out by Hu Shuefeng's ears. He's Duan Tian? Hu Shuefeng's gaze squinted, then descended onto Duan Tian's figure and flickered with a ghastly sheen. An outer court disciple that has only entered the 7-star sword sect for half a year actually dares to ignore me? Does he really think that he can act willfully just because he killed a 6th-level origin core stage outer court disciple? After Duan Tian's group of 3 entered the Mizar platform, the outer court elders of Mizar Peak had finally appeared. These outer court elders clustered around a middle-aged man in embroidered clothing and walked over swiftly. This embroidered-clothed middle-aged man was also the only person amongst all the people present that didn't wear the 7-star sword sect's uniform attire. The embroidered-clothed middle-aged man had a firm expression, and dignity was emitted from between his brows. His eyes flickered with a bright light, seemed to be able to see through everything. Peak Master! The crowd of outer court disciples on the Mizar platform opened up a path in succession, and respectfully bowed to the embroidered-clothed middle-aged man. The Peak Master of Mizar Peak. Duan Tian had already guessed the identity of the embroidered-clothed middle-aged man when he appeared. The facts proved that his guess was correct. Senior sister, he's the Peak Master of Mizar Peak. Zhengfan? Li Fei asked Zuoqing, who was beside her. Yes. Zuoqing nodded. Senior brother Sure How has come as well. A low exclaim broke the temporary silence on Mizar platform, and everyone glanced over. Outside the Mizar platform, 2 figures walked over shoulder to shoulder. One was a young man with triangular eyes and an appearance that was distorted and hideous. One was a middle-aged man with an arrogant expression, whose head was held high and chest was puffed up. The person by senior brother Sure Hao's side seems to be the Migres Peak's outer court elder, Zhaolin? Exactly, it's Elder Zhaolin. Many people recognized the person by Sure Hao's side. Zhaolin? Duan Tian's brows couldn't help but frown when he saw Zhaolin. As far as he was concerned, there surely wouldn't be any good thing that would come from Zhaolin and Sure Hao being together. He's Sure Hao? He virtually seems to have been cut out from the same mold as Sure Yin. Li Fei's beautiful eyebrows slightly frowned. Peak Master. After Sure Hao and Zhaolin arrived, they successively bowed to the Mizar Peak's Peak Master, Zheng Fan. Zheng Fan lightly smiled as he nodded to Zhaolin. Elder Zhaolin, I never expected that you would be so interested towards the second round of the outer court martial competition and actually personally come here. Peak Master, the outer court martial competition this time is different from before, thus I naturally had to come and broaden my horizons. A wisp of a smile appeared on the corners of Zhao Lin's mouth, seeming to be referring to something in what he said. Looks like you know about it. Zheng Fan glanced deeply at Zhao Lin, then looked towards Sure Hao, who was beside Zhao Ling, and lightly nodded. Sure Hao, I hope you're able to accomplish something today, and not bring shame to the name of number 1 disciple in the outer court. Don't worry, Peak Master. My target today is first place. Sure Hao nodded, and his triangular eyes flickered with a sheen of confidence. Very good. Zheng Fan nodded, then his body moved, leaping up onto the combat ring at the center, then looked around at the surroundings before slowly speaking. I believe everyone knows that there were some changes to the rules for the outer court martial competition this time. Today, There's something I have to say beforehand to the 60 outer court disciples that are participating in the second round of the outer court martial competition. Zhang Fan's voice wasn't loud but contained thick origin energy, clearly spreading into the ears of everyone present, like thunder piercing their ears. For a moment, the gazes of all the seven-star sword sect outer court disciples that were present had descended onto Zhang Fan, as they all wanted to know what Zhang Fan was going to say next. Could it be that there's a new rule? Duan Ling Tian's brows knit, and he wondered in his heart. Finally, under the gazes of everyone present, Zhang Fan spoke once again. Today, the second round of the outer court martial competition shall abandon the conventions of the past. For the sake of allowing all the outer court disciples that are participating in the second round of the outer court martial competition to be able to fight unrestrained and with their full might. When the 60 outer court disciples carry out the elimination battles for the second round of the outer court martial competition, life and death will be disregarded. In other words, even if someone dies on the combat rings today, the sect will not punish the outer court disciple that killed him. Zhang Fan finished speaking in one go. It was deathly silent on the Mizar platform. Life and death will be disregarded? In next to no time, some people had reacted to Zhang Fan's words, and their face went ghastly pale. These people were all 6th level origin core stage outer court disciples that had obtained the qualifications to participate in the second round of the outer court martial competition. They came here in high spirits, but now they were all dejected, like shriveled up eggplants in autumn. The Peak Master said earlier that today's outer court martial competition will disregard life and death. In other words, it allows killing amongst disciples. Seems to be so. Oh my God. In this way, wouldn't people be dying today? The crowd of 7-star sword sect outer court disciples that stood on the Mizar platform were instantly in an uproar. The outer court martial competition disregarded life and death. This was something that had never once appeared in the past history of the 7-star sword sect. I give up. I give up as well. In next to no time, some outer court disciples that had obtained the qualifications to participate in the second round of the outer court martial competition couldn't help but give up. These outer court disciples were all 6th level origin core stage martial artists. Even though they wanted to show off in the outer court martial competition, but now that it involved their lives, they had to be extremely careful. Otherwise, slight carelessness might lead to them losing their lives. So they didn't gamble. Moreover, they knew their own limitations. This time, nearly half of the outer court disciples amongst the 60 outer court disciples that obtained the qualifications to participate in the second round of the outer court martial competition were at the 7th level of the origin core stage. Even if they participated, it would still be impossible for them to obtain a placing. Only the 10 people that placed in the top 10 of the outer court martial competition were able to obtain the corresponding generous prizes. The Zhang Fan had a calm expression, seeming to not be surprised in the slightest, as he said indifferently. Now, those among the 60 outer court disciples that obtained the qualification to participate in the second round of the outer court martial competition and want to obtain a good result or even compete for the top 10, come stand by my side. There will be elders to register you. As for the outer court disciples that have given up, it isn't necessary for you to come over. Zhang Fan's voice had only just finished sounding out when a figure seemed to transform into a ghost that instantly flashed onto the combat ring and stood beside Zhang Fan. It's senior brother Hu Shuefeng. Instantly, many people recognized the person that ascended the combat arena first. As expected of the personal disciple of the Merak Peak's Peak Master, even when facing the outer court martial competition that's a life and death competition, senior brother Hu Shuefeng still isn't afraid in the slightest. Supposedly, the Peak Master of Merak Peak bestowed a grade 7 spirit sword that provides an amplification of 29% to senior brother Hu Shuefeng. Even senior brother Sure How might not be able to compare to his current strength. No wonder he's so confident. Presently, most outer court disciples all looked at Hu Shuefeng with adoration. Hu Sufeng became the center of attention of everyone. Not bad. Even the Peak Master of Mizar Peak, Zhang Fan, now nodded to Hu Shuefeng with a praising expression. Hu Shuefeng stood beside Zheng Fan, and a fierce gaze appeared within his eye. His gaze instantly found Duanling Tian from within the crowd of outer court disciples on Mizar platform and descended onto him. Duanling Tian's brows knit and looked back at Hu Shuefeng without a shred of fear. He was able to perceive that Hu Shuefeng's gaze was filled with provocation and contempt when looking at him. As if he was sure that once Duanling Tian knew that the second round of the outer court martial competition was a life and death competition, Duanling Tian wouldn't dare participate. Whoosh! Right at this moment, another figure flashed onto the combat ring and stood beside Zheng Fan. Senior brother Shi Hao. As expected of the number 1 outer court disciple of our 7-star sword sect. The crowd of outer court disciples on Mizar platform were in an uproar once again. The person that ascended the combat ring this time was precisely Shi Hao. Whoosh! In the next moment, Hidong, the 7th level origin core stage disciple of Migres Peak, had gone up as well. Duanling Tian, act within your limits. Zuoqing said to Duanling Tian. Then her figure moved to follow Hidong and descend onto the combat ring. In only a short moment, there were already 4 people who had ascended the combat ring and stood by the side of Zheng Fan. The 4 strongest disciples of our 7-star sword sect's outer court have all gone up now. The other 7th level origin core stage outer court disciples would be giving up as well, right? Under the clamorous noise of the crowd of outer court disciples on Mizar platform, many outer court disciples successively ascended the combat ring. These outer court disciples all had a similarity. They were all existences at the 7th level of the origin core stage. In next to no time, practically all the 7th level origin core stage outer court disciples that had obtained the qualifications to participate in the outer court martial competition had ascended the combat ring and indicated their determination. Including Shi Hao, Hidong, Zuoqing, and Hu Shuefeng, there were a total of 28 people. That Duanling Tian wouldn't have been frightened and won't dare participate in the second round of the outer court martial competition, right? Zhao Lin stood on Mizar platform and easily located Duanling Tian's location. His heart jerked as he schemed so much, but forgot this part. Duanling Tian was completely able to give up. Once Duanling Tian gave up, everything he had done secretly would have become useless. Could it be that he really was going to achieve nothing like drawing water with a bamboo basket? He was not resigned. Right when Zhao Lin had a burning anxiety. Duanling Tian. On the combat ring, Shi Hao's voice was like a thunderclap. His pair of triangular eyes flickered with an awe-inspiring sheen as he swept his gaze on the Mizar platform, seeming to be searching for something. You wouldn't be cowardly to the point of not daring to participate in the second round of the outer court martial competition, right? Pu ***y. Shi Hao's voice was filled with contempt and disdain. Pu ***y. When Shi Hao shouted out, he was slightly agitated in his heart. Even though he didn't know Duanling Tian, nor had he met Duanling Tian before, but he had an impression of everyone in the group of 7th level origin core stage outer court disciples that had ascended the combat ring now, and he was sure that Duanling Tian absolutely wasn't there. In other words, his main objective today, Duanling Tian, didn't come up. It was very likely that because of being afraid of death, Duanling Tian had given up. And this wasn't something he wanted to see. Along with Shi Hao's cold shout, the entire Mizar Peak went silent. The group of Migres Peak disciples that had come to spectate couldn't help but shoot their gazes to gather onto the faraway Duanling Tian. In next to no time, the remaining 7-star sword sect disciples followed the group of Migres Peak disciples to look at Duanling Tian. Duanling Tian frowned. He was just intending to ascend the combat arena when he heard Shi Hao crying out. Now, when he realized that along with Shi Hao crying Pu ***y, he'd become the center of attention of everyone. The corners of his mouth couldn't help but curl into a cold smile. He is Duanling Tian? Some of the 7-star sword sect disciples that hadn't seen Duanling Tian before glanced at Duanling Tian in surprise, as they felt that Duanling Tian was even younger than the rumors. It was precisely this person that killed the 6th level origin core stage outer court disciple of Fecta Peak? Unbelievable. Even though Duan Ling Tian's strength wasn't bad, but the outer court martial competition today was undoubtedly a competition between 7th level origin core stage outer court disciples. Even if he really participated, he could only be a sideshow, and even might be killed. Exactly. I think that giving up is his best choice. He's only a little over 20. It isn't a loss of face even if he gives up when facing a group of 7th level origin core stage outer court disciples. The crowd of 7-star sword outer court disciples whispered amongst themselves in discussion. Right at this moment, the Mizar Peak's peak master spoke once again. The disciples who are placed in the top 10 of today's outer court martial competition are all able to obtain prizes bestowed by the sect. The person who obtains the first place will even be able to obtain an extra profound origin fruit. 1. Profound origin fruit? A single stone brought about 1,000 ripples. Hiss, 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 hiss. Sounds of people letting out breaths of cold air rose and fell on the Mizar platform. What was profound origin fruit? Even if the 7-star sword sect disciples present hadn't seen it, they'd heard of it. To origin core stage martial artist, the profound origin fruit was a spirit fruit that could be encountered by chance but not be sought for. Allegedly, even if an 8th level origin core stage martial artist consumed this profound origin fruit, the martial artist would be able to directly break through to the 9th level of the origin core stage. Even if a 9th level origin core stage martial artist consumed it, the martial artist's origin energy would increase to the last bottleneck and be infinitely close to the verge of breaking through to the nascent soul stage. Profound origin fruit. It's actually the profound origin fruit. To an origin core stage martial artist, the profound origin fruit is virtually a priceless treasure and can be encountered by chance but not be sought for. Once a 7th level origin core stage martial artist consumes the profound origin fruit, his cultivation would surely be able to break through to the 8th level of the origin core stage in one go, even to the extent it's very likely for him to come close to the bottleneck to break through to the 9th level of the origin core stage. The crowd of 7-star sword sect disciple on Mizar platform were completely stirred, including Shihao, all the 28 7th level origin core stage outer court disciples that stood beside Zheng Fan on the combat arena had gazes that shone, as they were filled with yearning towards the profound origin fruit. Profound origin fruit. I'm determined to obtain it. Hu Shuefeng's handsome face was covered in a layer of icy coldness. No matter who it is, if they dare obstruct me from ascending to the first place, kill. Hu Shuefeng's words were filled with confidence and arrogance. That will depend on if you have the ability. Shihao grunted coldly. He was similarly determined to obtain the profound origin fruit. Dong and Zhuqing glanced at each other in the eye, and their gazes clashed into fierce sparks. The profound origin fruit caused everyone to be filled with desire. I never imagined that the 7-star sword sect actually obtained a profound origin fruit and even brought it out to be the prize for the first place of the outer court martial competition this time. Duan Ling Tian was slightly surprised. He was naturally clear of how valuable the profound origin fruit was. If it was said that before this, he wanted to seize the first place in the outer court martial competition this time for the sake of the pledge he made to Hu Li, then now, he had another objective. He wanted to obtain the profound origin fruit. If I can obtain the profound origin fruit, my cultivation can directly break through. Duan Ling Tian's eyes emitted burning flames that seemed as if able to burn everything, and was peerlessly domineering. Li Fei perceived Duan Ling Tian's yearning, and said in a light voice, "Scoundrel, the outer court martial competition prohibits the usage of source of external strength besides spirit weapon. Your inscriptions can't be used. If you're not a match for your opponent, then you must leap of the combat arena and admit defeat. Ku Air and I can't lose you." As she finished speaking, Li Fei looked at Duan Ling Tian anxiously. Even though she knew that Duan Ling Tian had many sources of reliance in his possession, like the 2 nascent soul stage little pythons and the pile of formidable inscriptions, however, none of these could be used during the outer court martial competition. He could only rely on his own strength. Duan Ling Tian stretched his hand out to stroke Li Fei's beautiful face that was smooth as jade, then smiled as he said in a light voice, "Little Fei, you have to be confident of your man. If you dare doubt me again, then be careful or I'll slap your butt." As he finished speaking, Duan Ling Tian suppressed his voice until only Li Fei could hear it. Li Fei never expected that Duan Ling Tian would actually tease her during an occasion like this, and her beautiful face blushed, as if blood would drip out of it. Humph! On the combat ring, Hu Shuefeng looked from afar at Duan Ling Tian and Li Fei, especially when Li Fei revealed such a charming and shy appearance before Duan Ling Tian. A ball of flames of envy inexplicably lit ablaze in his heart. He'd always been unhappy if he was without a woman, and his eyesight was extremely high. This woman was absolutely the most beautiful female disciple he'd seen since arriving at the Seven-Star Sword sect. When he saw her for the first time, he'd wanted to make this woman into his exclusive woman. But later on he instead noticed that this woman already belonged to someone. Duan Ling Tian. So long as I kill Duan Ling Tian, you will be mine. Hu Shuefeng looked at Li Fei, and his eyes flickered with a sheen of greed, as if Li Fei has already become his. Duan Ling Tian. Hu Shuefeng's gaze focused and descended onto Duan Ling Tian. Then he suddenly shouted in a low voice, "I heard that you'd once killed the Fecta Peak's 6th level origin core stage outer court disciple, Xiao Ying, 3 months ago. According to my knowledge, Xiao Ying was only a step away from the 7th level of the origin core stage. I presume that since you're able to kill him, your strength isn't inferior to us 7th level origin core stage outer court disciples. Now that 3 months have passed, your strength is surely even stronger. You wouldn't really want to give up, right?" As Hu Shuefeng finished speaking, his voice had a sense of ridicule. Hu Shuefeng, whether Duan Ling Tian gives up or not is his own personal choice, and has nothing to do with you. How could Zhuo Qing, who stood nearby, not know what Hu Shuefeng was intending when she heard him? And her face was once again enveloped in a layer of ice as she sneered. Hu Shuefeng didn't reply to Zhuo Qing, and instead looked at the nearby Duan Ling Tian. "Haha, Duan Ling Tian, could it be that you only know how to hide behind a woman and rely on a woman's protection? If it's really like this, you're really the shame of us men." The shame of men. What Hu Shuefeng said could be called ruthless. Duan Ling Tian, looks like the people you've offended are rather many. A wisp of bloodthirsty coldness appeared on the corners of Shi Hao's mouth, waiting for a chance to swallow Duan Ling Tian up. Along with Hu Shuefeng finishing, Duan Ling Tian once again became the center of attention. This time, it was different. Earlier, even though Shi Hao had provoked Duan Ling Tian, but the people present didn't think that Duan Ling Tian giving up was inappropriate. And no one would look down on Duan Ling Tian. After all, Duan Ling Tian's natural talent was there for all to see. He would surely be able to yield unusually brilliant results in the future, and become genius disciple that played a decisive role in the 7-Star Sword sect. But now, Hu Shuefeng had instead put a hat on Duan Ling Tian. If Duan Ling Tian gave up, he would undoubtedly be admitting that he only knew how to hide behind women and rely on the protection of women, losing the dignity of a man. Everyone was curious, how would Duan Ling Tian choose under such circumstances? A trace of rage arose in Li Fei's beautiful eyes when she heard Hu Shuefeng and was about to flare. Duan Ling Tian's pinched Li Fei's palm and lightly smiled. "Little Fei, no matter where it is in this world, there's never been a lack of mad dogs. You don't have to lower yourself to the same level as it." Although Duan Ling Tian's voice wasn't loud, but the Mizar platform was deathly silent now. Thus his words entered into the ears of everyone present. Mad dog? The corners of the 7-Star Sword sect disciples couldn't help but twitch. This Duan Ling Tian actually insulted Hu Shuefeng as a mad dog? They felt their scalps go numb. This Duan Ling Tian was insane. Duan Ling Tian is dead for sure. This was the thought in the hearts of most of the 7-Star Sword sect disciples. For a moment, Hu Shuefeng replaced Duan Ling Tian to become the center of attention of everyone. Hu Shuefeng's body fiercely shook, his incomparably handsome face lightly trembled, and his pair of eyes revealed dense killing intent, but it was quickly suppressed by him. Then he once again looked at Duan Ling Tian. "I really don't know. A piece of trash that obtained the qualification to participate in the second round of the outer court martial competition, but doesn't dare to participate. Where does this arrogance come from? Hu Shuefeng's voice was incomparably chilly, and he said the word trash especially prominently. Hu Shuefeng's words resonated with many people. These people were mostly Alcade Peak female disciples that were delusional towards Hu Shuefeng. Senior brother Hu Shuefeng is correct. A person that doesn't even have the courage to participate in the outer court martial competition doesn't have the qualifications to be arrogant. Exactly, Duanling Tian. If you're a man, then ascend the combat ring and participate in the second round of the outer court martial competition. If you don't dare, then you're the poo *** why that senior brother Sure How spoke of, and the trash that only knows how to rely on women like senior brother Hu Shuefeng said. Seeing the scene being controlled by him, Hu Shuefeng looked at Duanling Tian. His eyes slowly narrowed into a line, and the corners of his mouth had a complacent sneer. As if he was saying to Duanling Tian, "Kid, you're too inexperienced to fight me." Haha. Duanling Tian couldn't help but laugh. His eyes flashed with an awe-inspiring bright light as he glanced at Hu Shuefeng. Then his gaze descended onto Sure How before he slowly said, "When did I, Duanling Tian, say that I wanted to give up? If memory serves me correctly, presently, Peak Master Zhang Fan seems to have not stopped other outer court disciples from choosing whether to participate in the second round of the outer court martial competition, right?" 1. TL note. The origin here refers to origin energy, not a fruit of profound origins. The instant that Duanling Tian finished speaking, his figure jerked as he abruptly flashed out. Spirit serpent movement technique. He seemed to have transformed into a spirit serpent as he agilely flashed onto the combat arena, then descended by Zhuoqing's side. Duanling Tian used his actions to indicate his attitude towards the matter. He didn't give up. He wanted to participate in the second round of the outer court martial competition. Duanling Tian actually really wants to participate in the second round of the outer court martial competition. Is he unafraid of death? Some of the Migra's Peak disciples were completely stunned when they saw this scene. Every time Sure How came to Migra's Peak during these past 3 months, they were able to clearly feel the surging hatred Sure How revealed towards Duanling Tian. Sure How wished for nothing more than to burn Duanling Tian's bones and scatter his ashes. So, as far as they were concerned, Duanling Tian insisting on participating in the second round of the outer court martial meet was simply playing with his own life. They didn't look favorably upon Duanling Tian. After all, Sure How was a 7th level origin core stage disciples, and was even the #1 disciple in the 7-star sword sect's outer court. Duanling Tian, your muscle meridian rebirth scroll will soon be mine. The gloominess on Zhao Lin's face vanished when he saw Duanling Tian ascend the combat arena, and replacing it was a smile of having his plot prevail. He suddenly felt that everything he'd done secretly wasn't done in vain. Everything was worth it. Duanling Tian, why have you come up? Zhuoqing looked at Duanling Tian who was beside her, and her beautiful eyebrows frowned. You completely don't have to pay attention to what Hu Shuefeng said. Duanling Tian knew that Zhuoqing said this on because she was concerned about him, and at the same time that warmth arose within his heart, he lightly smiled. Senior sister, I didn't come up here because of what he said. I'd originally intended to participate in the second round of the outer court martial competition. I would still have come up even if he didn't say that. Zhuoqing was stunned, and when she saw Duanling Tian's incomparably firm gaze, she couldn't help but secretly sigh. As far as she was concerned, Duanling Tian was like a newborn calf that wasn't afraid of a tiger. He didn't know how high the sky was and how thick the earth was. He had an exaggerated opinion of his abilities. Not bad, Duanling Tian. You can still be considered as a man. Hu Shuefeng looked at Duanling Tian, and the corners of his mouth curled into a sneer as a cold light flickered in his eyes. But whether or not you can survive the second round of the outer court martial competition will depend on if you have the ability. At any rate, if you encounter me, I won't show mercy to you. Duanling Tian didn't pay the slightest attention to Hu Shuefeng's provocation, and his gaze descended on the nearby Sure How. Sure Hao's distorted and hideous face was now tangled together, and his triangular eyes were staring fixedly at Duan Ling Tian as it flickered with dense, killing intent. "You're Duan Ling Tian?" Meanwhile, the peak master of Mizar Peak, Zheng Fan, sized up Duan Ling Tian with interest. "I'd long since heard of your deeds. But even though you're able to kill a 6th-level Origin Core Stage Outer Court disciple, but you might not be able to defeat a 7th-level Origin Core Stage Outer Court disciple. Today, so long as you're able to survive, then in the future, the stage of the 7-star sword sect will be yours alone." Zhang Fan's words were filled with praise towards Duan Ling Tian. It caused Hu Shuifeng's face to sink, and the killing intent in his eyes grew deeper. As for Sure Hao, he instead neither agreed nor disagreed. As far as he was concerned, what Zheng Fan said made no difference, because he would absolutely not allow Duan Ling Tian to survive today. "Peak Master, you're too kind." Duan Ling Tian remained neither humble nor arrogant when facing Zheng Fan. Zheng Fan glanced deeply at Duan Ling Tian, then looked at the crowd of 7-star sword sect outer court disciples on Mizar platform. "Now, are there any more outer court disciples that have obtained the qualification to participate in the second round of the outer court martial competition and want to participate in today's outer court martial competition?" He waited for a while, but no one ascended the combat ring. Zheng Fan waved his sleeve, then announced in a loud voice, "The second round of the outer court martial competition officially begins." The rules of the second round of the outer court martial competition is extremely simple. Zheng Fan looked at Duan Ling Tian and the other 28 7th-level Origin Core Stage outer court disciples, and slowly said, "I'll carry out drawing of lots in a moment. There's a total of 29 lots. The person who draws lot number 1 is able to obtain a bye for 2 rounds and temporarily be placed in the top 10 places. The other 29 people will decide on 14 people, then decide on 7 people. These 7 people will temporarily be placed in the top 10 places. In this way, there would be 8 people that are temporarily in the top 10 places. The 7 people that were eliminated earlier will once again draw lots, and the person that draws lot number 1 will temporarily be placed in the top 10 places. At that time, there would only be one remaining empty spot in the top 10 places, and the last person will be decided on from the other 6 people to fill up this empty spot. After the 10 people who are temporarily in the top 10 places are confirmed, if anyone from the remaining 19 people are unconvinced of the ability of any one of the 10, they can issue a challenge. So long as you can defeat your opponent, or even kill your opponent, then you can replace your opponent to be placed in the top 10 places. When there's no more people issuing challenges, the people in the top 10 places would be the people that are in the top 10 of the outer court martial competition this time, and are able to obtain the prizes bestowed by the sect. Because the prizes for the top 10 people are different, so the specific placing of the top 10 has to be decided in the end. The person who is in the first place will additionally obtain a profound origin fruit. Now, is there anything that all of you are not clear on? Zheng Fan looked at Duan Ling Tian and the others as he asked. Duan Ling Tian and the others shook their heads, as Zheng Fan's introduction earlier was well organized and clearly states, and it was as clear as it could be. The person who draws lot number 1 in the beginning is undoubtedly the person with the best luck. The person is able to do without the first 2 battles, and temporarily be placed in the top 10 places. Duan Ling Tian thought in his heart, and was full of interest towards lot number 1. Of course, even if one is able to draw lot number 1 at the beginning, it didn't mean that one can have no worries later on, as there would still people issuing challenges later on. They were only able to do without some effort. In next to no time, a Mizar Peak outer court elder walked up swiftly and placed the lot box that was prepared onto the ground. Zheng Fan looked at Duan Ling Tian, and the other then spoke indifferently. "There's a total of 29 lot numbers within. All of you go up and draw it yourselves." In next to no time, an outer court disciple that was close to the lot box took the lead to draw out a lot number. Duan Ling Tian and Zhuqing walked shoulder to shoulder and had arrived by the lot box. Then Duan Ling Tian lightly smiled to Zhuqing. "Senior sister, you first?" Zhuqing nodded and didn't be courteous as she directly withdrew a lot number. Number 9. Duan Ling Tian put his hand into the lot box as well. Right at this moment, he instinctively extended out his spiritual force and fused it into the lot box. Duan Ling Tian originally didn't hold any hope, as his spiritual force wasn't eyes after all, and was unable to see the numbers of the lots. But when his spiritual force extended into the lot box, he instead clearly sensed that the aura of one of the lots within the lot box seemed to be different from the others. Could it be lot number 1? Duan Ling Tian thought inwardly, then directly grabbed onto that lot and withdrew it. He glanced carefully at it. It was lot number 1 as expected. Duan Ling Tian came to a sudden understanding when he looked at the number on the lot. No wonder his spiritual force was able to sense that the aura on lot number 1 was different from the other lots. So it turned out that the number on lot number 1 was written with red ink, whereas the numbers on the other lots were written in black ink. Presumably the reason lot number 1 was written in red ink was because it was much easier to differentiate it from the other lots. And it was precisely because of this that allowed Duan Ling Tian to draw lot number 1 without suspense. 1. Lot number 1. Zuoqing stood by Duan Ling Tian's side and couldn't help but exclaim in a low voice when she saw the lot number Duan Ling Tian had drawn. Lot number 1? Zuoqing's low exclaim spread throughout the silent Mizar platform, allowing everyone to hear it. F***K. It can't be. Duan Ling Tian's luck is so good? Lot number 1 was drawn by him from the 29 lots. This luck is too heaven-defying. It's just a coincidence. Moreover, so what if he's drawn lot number 1? It's only temporarily being placed in the top 10 places. If his strength is insufficient, then there will be others to eliminate him later. You're right. The crowd of 7-star sword sect outer court disciples couldn't refrain from exclaiming in a low voice. Some people sighed emotionally about Duan Ling Tian's luck. Some people felt that it didn't matter even if Duan Ling Tian had drawn lot number 1. Lot number 1? Zhang Fan was slightly surprised of Duan Ling Tian's luck. Lot number 1. However, the corners of the mouth of 2 people on the combat ring curled into cold smiles. It was precisely Shi Hao and Hu Shuefeng. You can only blame your fortune for being bad for drawing lot number 1. So long as I temporarily admit defeat in the beginning and don't enter the top 10 place, then at that time, I can directly challenge you and even kill you. Hu Shuefeng looked at Duan Ling Tian as he thought in his heart, and a sheen of ruthlessness jumped about within his eyes. Traces of icy coldness appeared in Shi Hao's triangular eyes as well. His current thoughts were exactly similar to Hu Shuefeng. Duan Ling Tian, your luck seems to not be so good. Meanwhile, Hidong had drawn his own lot, and he looked at Duan Ling Tian as he shook his head. He's clearly noticed the killing intent and excitement that Shi Hao and Hu Shuefeng's eyes revealed when they looked at Duan Ling Tian. As far as he was concerned, solely on the surface, Duan Ling Tian obtaining lot number 1 was his good luck. But in reality, it gave Shi Hao and Hu Shuefeng the opportunity to directly name him for a challenge. Duan Ling Tian naturally understood the deep meaning within Hidong's words, but he was indifferent to it and only lightly smiled. What ought to come will come. Hidong never expected Duan Ling Tian to still be able to be so composed at this time, and deeply glanced at Duan Ling Tian. Duan Ling Tian, if you can survive today, I, Hidong, will become friends with you. Duan Ling Tian's age wasn't old, but he had such a sanguine disposition, and it shocked Hidong, causing Hidong to feel admiration that came from the bottom of his heart. Duan Ling Tian lightly smiled, and it could be considered as his reply. Duan Ling Tian, directly admit defeat if Shi Hao and Hu Shuefeng challenge you. Zuoqing looked at Duan Ling Tian and was slightly worried as she spoke. Zuoqing, if he admits defeat, then he isn't Duan Ling Tian. Duan Ling Tian hadn't even opened his mouth when Hidong had already spoken to Zuoqing before him. Duan Ling Tian started laughing. Hidong, you seem to know me very well? It can't be considered as knowing you, but I'm able to perceive that you aren't the type of person who flees in the face of danger. Moreover, I saw confidence within your eyes. Hidong deeply glanced at Duan Ling Tian and slowly said, although, I don't know why you're so confident. Why would he have such confidence? Duan Ling Tian only smiled when he heard Hidong, but didn't give any added explanations. He believed that Hidong would soon know the answer for himself. A trace of astonishment flashed within Zhuo Qing's beautiful eyes when she heard He Dong, then seriously sized up Duan Ling Tian for a moment. In the end, she nodded and didn't try to persuade Duan Ling Tian anymore. She was able to perceive that Duan Ling Tian was indeed filled with confidence. A strong confidence. She thought inwardly. Perhaps this man of junior sisters would once again bring a miracle and make everyone shocked by it. In next to no time, all the outer court disciples that were participating in the second round of the outer court martial competition had drawn their own lots. Now, all 29 of you have drawn a lot number belonging to yourselves. Meanwhile, the Mizar Peak's peak master, Zhang Fan, slowly said, "Now, the disciples who obtain number 2 and number 3 go to the first combat ring. Disciples who obtain number 4 and number 5 go to the second combat ring, so on and so forth, until lot number 19. There were a total of 10 combat rings on Mizar platform. Now, besides the center combat ring being empty, each of the other 9 combat rings had 2 figures appear on them. The 9 outer court elders of Mizar Peak successively went over to preside over the battle. Senior sisters Zhuo Qing. Duan Ling Tian stood on the center combat arena in the center of Mizar platform that wasn't used and looked at that beautiful figure that was on the 4th combat ring. Right at this moment, "I admit defeat." Suddenly, an abrupt voice sounded out, breaking the short silence on Mizar platform. On the 7th combat ring, a person had spoken out to admit defeat. Senior brother Shi Hao has admitted defeat? The crowd of 7-star sword sect outer court disciples stared blankly at Shi Hao leaving the 7th combat ring, and they all had faces of disbelief. They wouldn't find it strange if anyone else admitted defeat. But the one that admitted defeat now was Shi Hao, the number 1 outer court disciple of the 7-star sword sect. Why did senior brother Shi Hao admit defeat? It's too strange. Some of the 7-star sword sect outer court disciples had bewildered expressions and completely didn't know what had happened, as it was difficult for them to understand what was happening before them. You don't know? Let me tell you. Senior brother Shi Hao has admitted defeat now for the sake of the challenges later on. If I'm not wrong, he surely wants to challenge Duan Ling Tian. Challenge Duan Ling Tian? Why? How do you know? No? I'm a Migres Peak disciple. Senior brother Shi Hao had come to our Migres Peak 3 months ago and spread the word of wanting to battle Duan Ling Tian on the life and death arena. But unfortunately, Duan Ling Tian was always hiding, and senior brother Shi Hao was completely unable to find an opportunity. Now that he has an opportunity, do you think he would miss it? So that's how it is. But how did senior brother Shi Hao and Duan Ling Tian become enemies? I didn't know of this at the beginning either, but later on, after inquiring many times, I found out that Duan Ling Tian had crippled the dantian of Shi Hao's sister, Shi Yan, who in our 7-star sword sect outer court doesn't know of how fond senior brother Shi Hao is of his sister Shi Yan. Tell me, would he not take revenge for Shi Yan? Duan Ling Tian crippled Shi Yan's dantian? The conversation between the 2 7-star sword sect outer court disciples quickly spread out. It wasn't long before practically everyone who stood on the Mizar platform knew of it. Duan Ling Tian crippled the dantian of Shi Hao's sister, Shi Yan. Shi Hao hated Duan Ling Tian to the bones and wanted to kill Duan Ling Tian. Duan Ling Tian, you? He Dong, who stood beside Duan Ling Tian, had an astonished expression, although he knew that Shi Hao wanted to look for trouble with Duan Ling Tian, but he didn't know that there were actually such reasons for it. Duan Ling Tian shrugged, then lightly smiled. Is it very surprising? He Dong nodded. It's indeed rather surprising. Who within our 7-star sword sect's outer court doesn't know that Shi Hao is incomparably fond of his sister and assents to her every demand? But you directly crippled her dantian. It would be strange if Shi Hao didn't come risk his life to kill you. But you don't seem like an unreasonable person. Why would you cripple Shi Yan's dantian? He Dong looked at Duan Ling Tian with a wondering expression. Actually, it's nothing much. That Shi Yao first humiliated and bullied my woman for no reason, then repeatedly proclaimed of wanting to cripple my dantian and even put it into actions. I could only give her a taste of her own medicine. Duan Ling Tian spoke very casually, as if what she said was of no importance. Hidong came to a sudden understanding. I'd long since heard of Shi Yin relying on Shi Hao's influence to act in an unruly and unrestrained manner in Alcade Peak. This time, she can only consider herself to be misfortunate for trying to bully you. The sound of their conversation wasn't loud, but it was still heard by Zheng Fan, who stood nearby. The corners of Zheng Fan's mouth slightly curled up. This Duanling Tian is really a genuine person. But his courage is really not little. Is he really not afraid of suffering Shi Hao's revenge? Shi Hao admitting defeat now is obviously because he was targeting Duanling Tian. Shi Hao returned, then looked at Duanling Tian with a vicious and ruthless gaze. Shi Hao, he's mine. Hu Shuefeng looked at Shi Hao, his eyes revealing a cold light, as he said with an overbearing voice. Humph. Shi Hao swept Hu Shuefeng with a cold and indifferent gaze, then ignored him, as if entirely not taking Hu Shuefeng seriously. Hu Shuefeng's face sank. His eyes flickered with a fierce light as he angrily said in his heart, Shi Hao, besides killing Duanling Tian today, I'll also kill you. After today, I'll replace you to become the #1 disciple in the 7-star sword sect's outer court. Meanwhile, an intense battle between two evenly matched opponents unfolded atop the other 8 combat rings. So strong. Duanling Tian clearly saw Zhuo Qing's figure flash on the 4th combat ring, dodging past the fierce and sharp sword strike of her opponent. Then the sword images in her hand enveloped downwards, as if transforming into rain that covered the sky, forcing her opponent to retreat. From start to finish, she didn't injure her opponent in the slightest. Thank you for showing mercy. The 7th level Origin Core stage male outer court disciples that was forced to retreat had cold sweat coming out from his forehead as he directly admitted defeat and walked off the 4th combat arena. Zhuo Qing was victorious and advanced. In next to no time, the results of the other few combat rings had come out. Another 7 people successfully advanced. Only some people were injured, but no one was killed. Although the outer court martial competition this time disregarded life and death, but in the eyes of the outer court disciples that ascended the combat ring, their opponents were seniors and juniors of the same sect after all. Since there were no grudges or enmity between them, there was no need to really kill each other. The same order as before, the remaining 10 outer court disciples enter the combat rings. Zheng Fan slowly said, Duanling Tian, I'm going. Hidong said to Duanling Tian, then ascended the faraway combat ring. I admit defeat. This time, another person admitted defeat. Hu Shuefeng. Because there was the precedent of Shi Hao, although the crowd of 7-star sword sect disciples were slightly surprised. But when faced with Hu Shuefeng admitting defeat, their surprise wasn't as exaggerated as when Shi Hao admitted defeat earlier. Senior brother Hu Shuefeng has admitted defeat? Could it be that it's because of Duanling Tian as well? This Duanling Tian first offended senior brother Shi Hao, and now offended senior brother Hu Shuefeng. Unless he takes the initiative to admit defeat today, he will die for sure. Some of the 7-star sword sect disciples glanced at Duanling Tian and couldn't help but shake their heads. In next to no time, the other 8 people had decided on the victor. Hidong was victorious. The outer court martial competition continued. Besides Duanling Tian and the 14 people that were eliminated, the other 14 people started the second round of battles. This time, the 7 people that obtained victory would be placed with Duanling Tian to temporarily be placed at the top 10 places. The battles commenced. On the 7 combat rings, sword images flashed out unrestrained. Every 7th level Origin Core stage outer court disciple, including Zhuo Qing and Hidong, were revealing everything they had learnt to their heart's content. Sword skills that dazzled the eyes whistled out, penetrating everywhere. As time passed by, the battles on the 7 combat rings came to an end successively. Zhuo Qing and Hidong had advanced. They and another 5 7th level Origin Core stage outer court disciples together were temporarily placed at the top 10 places. The 7 people that were eliminated drew lots once again. The person that drew lot number 1 would temporarily be placed in the top 10 places. The other 6 people would decide on the strongest person to occupy the last spot on the top 10. Henceforth, the disciples who were temporarily placed in the top 10 had been decided. Duanling Tian, Zhuo Qing, and He Dong were impressively listed. Very good. Now the 10 people that are temporarily placed in the top 10 have been decided. Next, challenges will be carried out. The other 19 outer court disciples can challenge any of the disciples that are placed in the top 10. If you defeat your opponent, you can replace their position. Conversely, if you lose, then you'll lose the qualifications to issue a challenge. Every person only has one chance to issue a challenge. I hope all of you will choose carefully, Zhang Fan said in a clear voice. Now, the remaining 19 people will follow according to the order of the lot numbers in their hands to challenge their opponent. Hu Shuifeng's face sank when he heard Zhang Fan, and his icy cold gaze descended onto the lot number in his hand. His lot number was 25. According to the rules that Zhang Fan spoke of, he would need to wait for the people before him to finish choosing before he is able to choose. Everyone else didn't matter, but that sure how is also before him. The first person to choose their opponent was the person in possession of lot number 2, a male outer court disciple. His gaze flashed past Duan Ling Tian and the other 9 disciples, and in the end descended onto Duan Ling Tian as he looked back and forth, and he was only confident on defeating Duan Ling Tian. Humph! But when a cold snort entered his ears, he instead noticed that Shi Hao's cold and indifferent gaze had descended onto him, causing him to feel as if he was sitting on pins. Only now did he recall that the only reason Shi Hao admitted defeat earlier was because of this Duan Ling Tian. He took a deep breath and didn't choose Duan Ling Tian in the end. He didn't dare offend Shi Hao. He could only choose another person. This resulted in him being defeated and losing the qualification to compete for the top 10 positions in the outer court martial competition. Duan Ling Tian watched all this coldly from the side. He knew that the first battle he would have today was bound to be facing Shi Hao, precisely like he had said to He Dong earlier. What ought to come, will come. Since he couldn't avoid it, then he would go straight at it and fight to his heart's content. Besides Duan Ling Tian, He Dong, and Zhuo Qing. In the following challenges for the second round of the outer court martial competition, the other 7 people that were temporarily placed in the top 10 were successively challenged. Some people were able to protect their place in the top 10, and some were replaced. In the combat arena, the battle became more and more intense. Sword images flashed out unrestrained, and the sounds of sword whistling in the wind continuously rose and fell. Although Duan Ling Tian was the weakest in the eyes of most of the 7th level origin core stage outer court disciples, no one challenged him. Everyone knew that he was the opponent that Shi Hao had decided on. If anyone were to dare challenge Duan Ling Tian, then they would undoubtedly be offending Shi Hao. They didn't dare offend Shi Hao. As for He Dong and Zhuo Qing, they were both outer court disciples that were famous within the 7-star sword sect's outer court, and were equally famous to Hu Shuifeng, only slightly inferior the number 1 disciple in the outer court, Shi Hao. So, in the eyes of the group of 7th level origin core stage outer court disciples that were issuing challenges, challenging He Dong and Zhuo Qing was utterly wasting their chance to issue a challenge. Every disciple only had one chance to issue a challenge, so they had to cherish it properly. So, they tried their best to choose opponents that they were confident against. Along with one of the outer court disciples that was placed in the top 10 losing and was replaced, it was the turn of the next outer court disciple to issue a challenge. Right at this moment, the bustling and clamorous Mizar platform completely quieted down and became silent. Everyone's gazes descended onto a single person. This was a young man with a hideous and distorted appeared, and a pair of triangular eyes that flickered with icy coldness that was focused on a person that was on the combat arena in the center. It's finally Senior Brother Shi Hao's turn. Senior Brother Shi Hao is just waiting for this moment. Looks like this Duan Ling Tian is about to suffer. If I was him, I'd surely directly admit defeat. The gazes of the 7-star sword sect outer court disciples that were present all followed Shi Hao's gaze to descend onto Duan Ling Tian as they whispered in discussion. Duan Ling Tian stood there, no moving like a mountain, and had a carefree expression that seemed like it wouldn't change even if Mount Tai collapsed. Duan Ling Tian. At the same time Shi Hao shouted coldly, his body flashed as if transforming into a cheetah as he pounced onto the first combat ring, and his icy cold gaze never left Duan Ling Tian. He challenged Duan Ling Tian. He wanted to kill Duan Ling Tian. Utmost rage and killing intent was mixed within Shi Hao's icy cold gaze, and he wished for nothing more than to tear Duan Ling Tian into 1,000 pieces, then burn Duan Ling Tian's corpse and scatter the ashes. Muscle Meridian Rebirth Scroll. At the nearby corner of the first combat ring, Zhao Lin stood there, and his eyes emitted joy and greed, as if he'd already seen the scene of himself obtaining the miraculous cultivation method, the Muscle Meridian Rebirth Scroll. For the sake of the Muscle Meridian Rebirth Scroll, he could be said to have exhausted all of his mental efforts. Especially the last-minute change in the rules of the outer court martial competition this time to become a life and death competition was also something he'd put in effort from behind the scenes. Everything he'd done was only for the sake of obtaining Duan Ling Tian's cultivation method, the Muscle Meridian Rebirth technique. Now, he'd already seen hope, the hope to obtain the Muscle Meridian Rebirth technique. Humph! Hu Shuefeng stood in the distance. His face was incomparably gloomy, and his fierce eyes seemed to be waiting to swallow someone up. This Shi Hao actually dared seize his prey. His gaze descended onto Shi Hao, and he'd already made a decision in his heart. One Shi Hao killed Duan Ling Tian and replaced Duan Ling Tian to be placed in the top 10. Then, he would directly challenge Shi Hao. In the past, he wasn't quite confident when facing Shi Hao. But it was different now. He had a grade 7 spirit sword that provided an amplification of 29% in his possession now, and his strength had increased greatly. He was confident in defeating and even killing Shi Hao. Scoundrel! Even though Duan Ling Tian had revealed strong confidence before Li Fei, but Li Fei was still slightly worried, and she bit on her seductive red lips as her gaze concentrated on Duan Ling Tian. After all, inscriptions couldn't be used in the outer court martial competition. The Mizar platform was in an uproar once again when they saw Duan Ling Tian standing there, and not moving even after a long time. Could it be that Duan Ling Tian intends to admit defeat? Looking at his current attitude, he ought to. He wouldn't, right? I still want to see him fight. I'm extremely curious of how the heck did this young man that's a little over 20 had killed a 6th level Origin Core Stage Outer Court disciple, and how he passed the first round of the Outer Court Martial Competition to advance to the second round of the Outer Court Martial Competition. I'm curious as well. Unfortunately, we probably won't be able to see it. Most of the 7-star Sword Sect Outer Court disciples thought that Duan Ling Tian had already intended to admit defeat. The smile on the corners of Zhao Lin's mouth completely froze. This Duan Ling Tian wouldn't really want to admit defeat, right? Zhao Lin had a burning anxiety in his heart and wished for nothing more than to rush over, then drag Duan Ling Tian up and throw him onto the first combat ring, and make Duan Ling Tian and Shi Hao battle each other. Haha, Shi Hao, looked like you frightened Duan Ling Tian quite badly. Why don't you choose another person to challenge? How about you leave this Duan Ling Tian to me? Hu Shuefeng laughed loudly and glanced in ridicule at the faraway Shi Hao who stood on the first combat ring. Shi Hao paid no attention to him, and his cold and fierce gaze descended onto Duan Ling Tian. Duan Ling Tian, since you dare participate in the second round of the Outer Court Martial Completion, you wouldn't be not daring enough to accept my challenge, right? Looks like you really are a Pu****y, a Pu****y through and through. Pu****y. Shi Hao once again willfully humiliated Duan Ling Tian in front of everyone. Right at this moment, Duan Ling Tian, who had once again attracted the gazes of everyone, finally took action. Duan Ling Tian took a stride forward, and his calm eyes descended onto Shi Hao as he said in a deep voice, "Shi Hao, you hate me to the bone and wish for nothing more than to kill me right now to take revenge for you, sister. Shi Yin, I know all of this." Humph. Shi Hao's gaze went slightly cold, and his triangular eyes were filled with ruthlessness. It's good that you know. Unless you want to be a Pu****y through and through today. Otherwise, once you dare ascend this first combat arena, I, Shi Hao, the brother of Shi Yin, will annihilate you. Duan Ling Tian's face maintained its expression when he heard Shi Hao's ruthless words, and he slowly said, "Do you know why I crippled your sister, Shi Yan's, Dantian?" Shirhao was slightly impatient. I don't care why you crippled my sister's Dantian. When you crippled my sister's Dantian and crippled her entire cultivation, you were bound to be a dead man. You were bound to only be able to regret on the road to hell. This time, Duan Ling Tian's face finally changed. What you mean is, even if there's a reason that I crippled Shi Yan's Dantian, because Shi Yan initiated the provocation and initiated the attack, even then, you wouldn't feel guilty? You wouldn't feel that it was Shi Yan who brought this all upon herself? You wouldn't feel that you didn't teach your sister properly? Duan Ling Tian's face slightly sank, and his cold and indifferent gaze stared fixedly at Shirhao as he spoke word for word. Whoosh! The Mizar platform was in an uproar as all the 7-star sword sect disciples came to a sudden understanding. So it turned out that there was a reason for Duan Ling Tian crippling Shi Yan's Dantian. I'd long since heard that Shi Yan relied on the fact that her brother, Shirhao, was the #1 disciple in the outer court to act willfully and unrestrained in Alcade Peak, and bullied others all over. Now it was seemed that all this was true. This time, Shi Yan could be considered to have bit off more than she could chew, and her cultivation was even crippled because of this. If it's really like this, then Shi Yan did indeed deserve it. Yeah, Duan Ling Tian doing this could be considered to be removing a tumor from the Alcade Peak and even our 7-star sword sect. The crowd of 7-star sword sect disciples discussed animatedly. When Shirhao heard Duan Ling Tian, his distorted and hideous face had already become tangled together. Now, when he heard the discussion of the crowd of 7-star sword sect disciples, his face seemed as if it had become a rope, completely entangled together. Duan Ling Tian. Shirhao suddenly shouted explosively, with a voice that was like a thunderclap. His gaze that was icy cold to the limit passed through his triangular eyes to descend onto Duan Ling Tian. I, Shirhao, will tell you right now, no matter what my sister did, no matter if my sister was in the wrong, in my eyes, no matter what my sister did, you, Duan Ling Tian, don't have the qualifications to cripple her cultivation. Don't have the qualifications? Duan Ling Tian burst out laughing brilliantly. Then what you mean is, your sister, Shi Yan, wanted to attack and cripple my Dantian. I can't resist? I can only stand on the spot and wait for your sister to cripple my Dantian? I can only be trampled on at the mercy of your sister? Exactly, Shirhao said in a cold voice. This is your best choice. But unfortunately, you didn't choose this. If you'd choose like this, perhaps you would only become a cripple and wouldn't die. Whereas now, you are bound to die at my hands. Do you regret it? But unfortunately, there's no use no matter how much you regret it. Today, you, Duan Ling Tian, will die without a doubt. Shirhao said word for word, with a voice that contained grimness that revealed his determination to kill Duan Ling Tian. His words were filled with ruthlessness and killing intent. This caused most of the 7-star sword sect outer court disciples that were present to feel a chill run down their spines. Of course, there were also some 7-star sword sect outer court disciples that were extremely furious. Shirhao is so overbearing. Yeah, according to what he said, no matter whose Dantian his sister wanted to cripple, those people can't even resist. Otherwise, that person would be targeted by him and killed. Does he really think that the 7-star sword sect is owned by his clan? Duan Ling Tian, don't pay any attention to him. No one will look down on you even if you admit defeat. Right, with your natural talent in the martial Tao, you'll be able to easily surpass Shirhao in a few years. There's no need to throw away your life for the sake of a dispute caused by personal feelings. Your future is glorious and is far from something Shirhao can compare to. You must think carefully. Shirhao's word was like a stone that caused 1,000 ripples, completely causing the Mizar platform to be stirred. At the same time that many 7-star sword sect outer court disciples were enraged, they also ceaselessly advised Duan Ling Tian to admit defeat. There was a scale in everyone's heart. Although they couldn't be considered to have any relationship with Duan Ling Tian, but at this moment, that scale within their heart was undoubtedly tipped towards Duan Ling Tian, the person who was in the right and was disadvantaged. Duan Ling Tian's encounter caused them to feel as if they'd experienced it themselves.
Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed today's episode. If you did, please like, share, and subscribe.